Welcome to the Big Week in Gaming podcast. And boy, it's been a big week in gaming. I'm integot for episode 18 on Sunday, the 15th of November, 2020. As always, I'm joined by the number one contender in the best Xbox RPG player in the entire world, Swinny.
Hello.
And back by popular demand, next-gen gamer himself, friend and foe of the podcast, Mike. How you going, Mike?
Man, it must be such a slow news week if you guys invited me back.
No, it's a big week. It's always a big week in gaming. And it is a very big week in gaming, given that we've got the start of the next gen. And we thought,
that's right.
Given that we have a gaming podcast, neither Swinny or myself will be getting
because you're so cheap.
Yeah, pretty much. And given that you are a splurger and you have got the PlayStation 5, I believe, is that right?
Wait, PlayStation 5? You said to do a review of the PlayStation. You didn't specify which one.
You've got 5 PlayStation 1s.
I got a PlayStation 2 and a PlayStation 3, which I guess adds up to 5. And the original PlayStation and a 4, so I guess it also adds up to 5. So
shortly we'll be chatting with you about the first impressions you have of the PlayStation 5. We're also going to cover xCloud is launching in Australia very much earlier than we thought it would be. And also taking advantage of Game Pass Ultimate, I actually played through and beat Alan Wake. I always want to say Alan Wake. So just my thoughts on that. And it'd be really interesting to see if you guys have played it. So yeah,
wow,
how's the week been, Mike?
The week's been alright, but hang on, you've played anything other than Rocket League? What? Actually, I've played... That's the big news this week. That's what we should be talking about.
I can genuinely say I've played many more games than both of you combined, I'd say, if I can go through the list.
Okay,
I want to check. So new consoles launched this week. Swinny, Did you get a new console this week?
No, I was in EB yesterday, and there's part of me, I'm like, maybe I should ask. I'm like, nah.
Why wouldn't you though? It's all backwards compatible, right?
It's almost shameful.
Because I'm unlike you. I need a reason to purchase a new console. Mike.
Yes, 60 FPS gaming. Anyway, we'll get into that.
Mike, can I just say, yes. I said last week's show, which of course you would have listened to, that Swinny, I know you didn't. Swinny, if he sees it in the store, he's just going to buy it.
Of course he will.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that he was thinking about asking, if it was there, if they said, hey, it's crazy. We've got a Series X here. The person didn't pick it up. They don't want it anymore. Oh, it's just nuts, isn't it? I reckon you would have it, Swinny.
There was that devil part of me that was tempted, but
you would definitely get it.
I held out.
I think there's a short window that if you see it in the store in the next few weeks, you'll get it. And then it will pass, and then you'll go back to being like, no, I need a reason. I need an Elden Ring or something like that to come out for you to be compelled to buy it.
He'll get it.
The unfortunate part is I've got a good reason now, but I still don't think it's worth it, if that makes sense.
Okay. What's the good reason?
Wait. We'll get into that because I think I know what it is. We'll tease it out in a second.
Okay. Let's tease it out. So,
Swinny, you did not get a new console. Mike, did you get a new console?
I did.
Yes. And then I'll just say for myself, did I get a new console? Yes, I did.
I don't know, did you?
I did get a new console this week.
Did you get the little Game Gear thing?
Yeah,
so did I.
The Nintendo Game & Watch.
Yeah, the Game & Watch. I got one of those too.
Wait, I've got to pick mine up, so I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. So I read the definition. Handhelds are technically game consoles, so...
Well, it counts. It counts.
Yeah, so I haven't... it was a really dumb move on my part. I went with my wife, and she's like, "Oh, is this for Christmas?" And I go, "Yeah." And then she just took it away, so I didn't even get to really look at it. I'm like,
"Is it actually for Christmas? Are you gonna use it, or are you just gonna hold on to it and try to sell it for?"
No, I'm not gonna sell it. Like definitely
4 times more later.
No. Actually, just on that quickly, it isn't even sold out in the States, so I think you'll be able to pick it up for at least price in Australia, like RRP. Hopefully. And I wouldn't be surprised if it starts to go down in price, because I don't think it's really an item that people genuinely, like a huge amount of people want, but the people who want it, I think, have been able to get it.
But it's limited, right?
Like it is limited, but I think, limited, yeah, you know how it is. It's like with Last of Us Part 2, like the special collector's boxes were limited,
They're still selling them now.
Correct. It was like the supply and demand was wrong, right? So it is limited. Definitely not like hundreds of thousands of units, but they didn't get that balance right. So,
well, I think it's also because, I mean, I love the game, but again, it relatively speaking flopped compared to what they thought it would.
No, it didn't. It didn't flop. How
well,
can you
no,
say
flopped
that Last of Us Part 2 flopped? It's like the highest selling exclusive.
Was it the highest selling exclusive?
Pretty sure it's the highest selling exclusive, or at least like in terms of the pace that it was.
I didn't mean. Sorry, I didn't. Let me clarify that. I didn't mean it flopped in the sense that it didn't sell. I think relative to what they thought it would have sold.
No, I don't.
Given the hype and everything of the original.
No, it sold like gangbusters.
I have a feeling Ghost of Tsushima probably sold more.
I probably did, yeah.
No, you guys are nuts. What are you talking about?
Look it up. We'll look it up.
I read a report the other day, but I don't know if it was excluding. I don't know if it was talking about new IPs.
That was talking about new IP. What you're talking about?
It was okay.
Yeah, that was
well. Anyway, regardless,
the best on PlayStation 4. That was a new IP that's exclusive to Sony. Like, I'm like, that's a lot of hoops to jump through. Like, what are they comparing it to? Like Dreams? Like, come on. Like, what the hell? Yeah, no, I can't find the stats quickly on Last of Us Part 2. I'm pretty sure it's like...
No, that's fine. We'll look at it.
It was the fastest selling exclusive. That's what they were saying.
So how come the collectors didn't sell? Because usually those things would go like hotcakes, especially for a game that size.
Supply and demand, like if they, made a little bit more than they were expecting given the sales of it last time, and then, just didn't click as well with people. It's pretty expensive, that collector's
So you're telling me it didn't click and it didn't sell as well as they thought it would? Is that what you're saying?
There's also something called... There's also something called a worldwide pandemic, so I think a lot more people would have likely purchased digitally versus physically.
That's true.
If they would make that choice in the past. So.
Yeah, can't really purchase a digital statue.
Yeah, but that game was controversial. I'll give you that. Like, critically and commercially, it was a huge success. But yes, like there was a small portion of the audience that was really upset with certain parts of that game.
I don't know about small portion. It was a significant
very
chunk.
Vocal. No, it's a very vocal, small portion. I don't know. Do you disagree, Swinny?
I agree with you. I think it's a very, very vocal minority. But they're very vocal.
So I've had just trying to think off the top of my head, about 5 friends that have played it, out of which it's a mixed bag. It's about half if I, roughly split it out. 2 people really didn't like it and 2 people actually enjoyed it as well. And I enjoyed it. That's a very small sample size in terms of real world usage.
How many people actually liked it? Any element of it is like people just because the game was so hyped up. Like they're talking about it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
List, you know what I mean?
There was
and then
a
it's like,
huge
well, hang on,
element
it's
of
not
that.
Great. It's a great game, but like calm down, people. I feel like it's almost like Australian style tall poppy syndrome is spreading throughout the world via Twitter. Like people just wanting to hate on things, to hate on it.
Look, I again, as someone who actually really did enjoy it, I can see why people did complain. It's not. I don't think it was completely baseless.
Sure.
I think massively exaggerated in some instances, but certainly not baseless. And it wasn't so much, all the different characters that were introduced that for people who haven't played the game yet, I'm not going to spoil anything. It was probably the death of a particular character that I think robbed a lot of people.
I mean, like that is a spoiler.
Well, no, because I didn't mention which one. It could just be a new character that was introduced and then very
death
quickly killed off.
It
could have been an enemy. It could have been one of the primary enemies that just robbed people the wrong way. So
that's funny.
And I think that was probably the key.
And I want to circle back. I want to circle back to Swinny. Because one thing is, as our audience knows, Swinny is like one of the biggest fans of Assassin's Creed. And one thing that happened this week was the new game came out. You got it on launch day, which is the 12th. And you don't want to talk. Oh, it was like the 10th, I should say. And you don't even have your impressions yet. Like, I'm surprised about
Why not?
I want to hear your impressions.
Okay, so before I just get to Assassin's Creed, I just want to talk about. I've kind of went a little bit crazy this week in regards to just starting new games. And
so you might be threatening me then. Go on.
So unlike you, Integot, I plan to finish all of these games.
Oh, hang on. I started Alan Wake and I went through and finished it.
I know.
I have been Ori. I 100%ed Ori. 100%.
That's an unfair stab.
Okay, that's
an unfair stab.
Impressive.
No, I definitely that was unwarranted. So they put 5 Final Fantasy VIII Remastered
Oh,
on
yeah.
Game Pass PC,
Yeah,
and
that was
so
cool.
I've jumped straight into that already. Kind of like about 15 hours into that. I've been playing one of the classics, one of my favorite games of all time, Grim Fandango Remastered as well.
Yeah.
Yes, I have that on the
And
Switch.
oh, I tell you
It's
what,
really
that
good.
game still has probably the best dialogue and the funniest jokes of any game I've ever played.
Do you
I
reckon that
just
game
love
would
it so
click with
much.
me? Because I'm always debating about playing it.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Okay, I'll play
yes,
it then. Yeah, I'll
and the
play it.
thing is as well, with the remaster version, at least, unless it was patched in later, they added mouse support, which is really cool.
Whoa, there
Because
wasn't
before,
mouse support before?
so Grim Fandango was controlled with keyboard in
Oh
the
my
original
god.
version.
Okay.
Yeah, which was fine, but I'm kind of like I'm going to play it with the mouse, like a typical
Point and click.
classic LucasArts. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's pretty cool. The other game that I haven't played other than Assassin's Creed was that I have played, I should say, is Tales of Berseria. So after finishing Vesperia, I said, "Man, I've been staring at Berseria on Steam for ages, and I'm going to load it up." It's the latest game in the series that came out in 2016. So I've been enjoying that so far. I actually really, really like it. So that's going to be a huge game. That's going to take me a long time. And it's very interesting because, unlike Vesperia, I haven't played through it before. And also, there's no achievements, or at least ones I care about. So I'm experiencing it completely just, as the devs intended. So it's really cool. But that brings me to Valhalla. So the reason I don't want to give like a long, big segment about my impressions is because, honestly, I haven't put enough time into the game yet to really probably unlock and see. The game has a lot going on, and there's like a prologue in the beginning where it's a pretty big map for the prologue area. So I spent so much time just doing a lot of stuff there, and I'm already like probably like 15 hours in or something. But the thing is, I then moved, got to England where the main game is set, and then it starts to unlock all the different systems about, okay, you unlock the kingdoms and the storylines and things. And the game is there's a few things I will say. The game is very different than the past couple of Assassin's Creed games. Well, it's built on the foundations of those. This is a very unique game in a lot of ways. And the other thing I'll say is they removed random loot, which is really, really, I think, a good change. So while I do love me some RPG mechanics, of course. I've always felt that the random loot was there to kind of, there were also, in Origins there were microtransactions, loot boxes
Yeah,
linked
there was
to
like
that
XP
as well.
boosts or something, right? And they've removed that.
Out of place a bit.
Yeah, but with there's no random loot anymore that I can see that, and I've looked it up as well. So that's, I think, a good change. You still get equipment and stuff from chests and probably from beating certain characters and stuff. And yeah,
but is that random? Sorry, the equipment you get in chests, or is it fixed in the location?
Not sure. I imagine it's probably fixed.
I like that though, because I feel like it's more rewarding that that you go to a challenging area and the item that you get in there is a particular type of item, and it's going to potentially be really good.
Next week when I actually do a proper look at it, I'll have confirmation there, but I'm fairly certain it is fixed.
Okay.
But yeah, and I guess the other thing that really surprised me is that, so the way they handle the male and female version of Eivor, the main character, is essentially you can swap at any time between them, and they kind of have a narrative reason for it, which is actually pretty interesting. Or you can have it set where it kind of changes between them based on, maybe it's like curated, it'll be like, okay, this is the female Eivor here and the male Eivor here. And honestly, the male Eivor's voice acting is really, really good. It's almost the exact opposite, I feel, of Odyssey,
Alexios
Alexios and Cassandra. Cassandra was just like way better than Alexios. Yeah. I actually find the male Eivor voice acting really, really good. So
how do you change characters, by the way? So I started playing it as well, and I picked the middle option where it automatically swaps between them. Where do you even change it later? I haven't bothered yet.
So when you're in the main menu, you can select, I think there's an animus option, and when you select that, it then has like change I don't know if it's change appearance or something like that, or change
cool.
stream or something. But yeah, I'll get into my more detailed thoughts next week when I've actually put a lot more time into it. But so far, I really like it. And the one last thing I'll say is that they've done some really, really cool stuff with the way that what they call world events play out. So I'll talk to that next week.
Yeah, nice. And, I've been smashing a bunch of games and I haven't actually played Rocket League this week, amazingly.
What?
No. So
aren't there some sort of the weekly challenges or something that you have to keep up with, though?
No, but as you know, I had a whole piece on me breaking up with Rocket Pass, so I don't do any of that stuff. And I actually love the game so much more now.
Yes, I do remember that, yeah.
So, yeah, getting through Alan Awake. I started playing Crypt.
Alan Awake. Okay.
I always say Alan Awake. Alan Wake. I don't know.
Are you sure you played this game?
No, the obvious thing is like a wake, like a, Alan A.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's.
So it's always in my head like that.
Yeah.
So whenever I see it, I always think Alan Awake.
See, to me, it sounds like you're saying Eleanor, like the female name Eleanor. Eleanor Wake.
Alan Wake. And it's also, I think that it doesn't roll off your tongue as well as Alan Awake. Anyway, Alan Wake. Got through that. That was a really cool game. We'll talk about it later. Crypt of the Necrodancer. I finally started playing that. I think we mentioned it on the bargain bin a few podcasts ago. So I picked it up. And that game is so cool. Like, I don't know if you guys have played that game. Man, I'm so hooked on that game. It's like this rogue-like, music
beat
sort of game.
Music.
Yeah. It's really, really cool. It's really clever.
Okay, I'll grab it next time. Whenever I see it on special, I'm like, oh, I should get that. But
I want to get the Zelda spin-off.
There's a Zelda spin-off?
Yeah. There's like a Zelda version of that game with like Zelda, Link, Zelda, like all the sort of like a whole bunch of other characters from the Zelda universe.
Hey, it's Cadence of Hyrule, so if you've heard that name, Mike, that's what that is.
Okay, cool.
And the actual name is like so much longer than that. It's like Cadence of Hyrule, Crypt of the Necrodancer, The Legend of Zelda. I think that's what it's called, or inspired by The Legend of Zelda or something. It's like the longest title ever.
There's some really
is that on
cool...
Switch?
Yeah. The Zelda one's only on Switch, whereas Crypt of the Necrodancer is on everything.
There's some really cool AGDQ runs of Crypt of the Necrodancer, so that's where I know most of my knowledge of that game. But...
yeah, it's such... You know how I love musical game, like music games? It's such a cool game. And I think for most people, just get Crypt of the Necrodancer. You can get it so cheap. Whereas the Zelda one, I love Zelda, so I'm happy to pay the premium, and it is a premium. I got through a bunch of Tetris Effect, because that came out on Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. I already have it on the PS4, but I played the multiplayer version of it, the Connected DLC. It's really, really cool. It's super cool. Like, it's quite crazy to think, to me, this is the absolute definitive version of Tetris, a game that's like so old that they have updates that are worthy of playing, actually.
The definitive version's still the Game Boy one, though.
It's kind of funny. Like, a lot of people would say the NES version. And Swinny, I know that you didn't even know about the hold piece and all this other stuff with Tetris.
What do you mean? Didn't even know about the hold piece?
Well, we spoke about it, and you're like, "Oh, well, the hold piece." Like, and I'm like, "Dude, that's been around forever."
No, I know it's been around. I was saying that's just I don't like playing Tetris with the hold piece. That's
hold piece.
My preferred way of playing Tetris.
There's a mode for you in the Connected DLC where you play as like this old school mode, and it looks like the NES, but with the crazy 3D graphics that Tetris Effects has, and there's no hold piece. You can't pivot.
That's good.
You can't actually pivot the Tetraminos when they hit. Like, they just stick like the NES version. It's super cool. Like, I played through that as well. Like, I was loving it. I feel like no one's talking about that game at all. It's such a cool game. And then the last two that I'll just mention, I finally started to get really into Minecraft because of the whole Game of Some Other Year, 2011. And like, I didn't get Minecraft at all. I probably played it for like 10 or 15 hours previously, but the game has now clicked with me, and I'm like, oh man, I see the appeal of it. And I could easily see hundreds of hours evaporating in this game. It's so cool.
Oh yeah. Did you play story mode or free play?
Well, I think I've stuffed up because I installed the RTX demo, or like the beta for it, on my PC. So it's like an all ray tracing version of Minecraft. But there's a known problem. If you go on the Xbox Insider version, it's really hard to get off it. Like, you have to do these crazy things like go in the command prompts, issue commands, and all this other kind of stuff to try to get out of it. And it just doesn't work on my PC. I can't get out of the beta. So I can't get back to the original version of it. So there's like limitations in the beta
So you're
version.
stuck with RTX on now?
Yeah, but then it's only certain worlds.
Nice.
So I'm actually thinking of just getting it on the Switch because I'd probably be more likely to be playing it just randomly.
I have it on the Switch, and I think performance is a bit of an issue with it. And something about I didn't enjoy it as much as I did on PC, and I think keyboard and mouse just works so much better for a game like that.
Oh, okay. Well,
I mean, it's fine. And you know, Swinny, you've played it. I remember ages ago we were playing it on Xbox One, I think it was, and it works fine. And the controller is not an issue per se, but it's just a little janky. And I don't know if it's just the frame rate or what it is, but it wasn't as nice as I thought it would be, and it just put me off a little bit. That's not to say don't try it. Absolutely give it a crack. It's not the same experience as on PC. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll probably double my efforts to try to fix it and get back to the.
And it's got no ray
version.
tracing.
And then the last one for me is I actually played Control on the Switch.
Oh wow! How does that run?
How?
And look,
did you VPN it or what?
No, so I have a US eShop account, and you just log in and it works. But it's obviously going to be janky because it's Australia. And you know, context is like I have a very good connection, close connection to Sydney, and then the kind of exit point out to the American pipeline.
We should clarify for anyone who doesn't know, it's a streaming cloud version of the game.
Yes. So it's the cloud version. We talked about it, I think, last week. And it was only for the US. But I was like, I might as well try it to see, you know, what it runs like. Because it's going to be bad because it's streaming from the US. But having played it, I was like, man, this is kind of crazy. Like, if Nintendo does release... lag? No, there obviously is, right? But it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Like, I was shocked. Now, I would never play a first-person shooter in, like, a cloud thing, but action games, there's, like, a whole bunch of games like Swinny, like, all RPGs and things like that. I think you can easily get away with it as long as there's a data center close to you. And then just looking at the Switch itself, like, if they release, like, a Switch Pro with 5G or something like that, like, it is super viable in my view now. Like, it just... It feels really good on the Switch. Like, it actually shocked me. Like, if you're going to have a streaming platform, it's probably the best streaming platform because I think it's going to be far superior than your mobile, which we will talk about later with the xCloud streaming. So, yeah, it's been a busy week. There's other games that I played as well that I won't talk about.
I'm very impressed. Extremely impressed. See what you can achieve when you get off that perpetual cycle of just playing one game over and over again.
Okay.
Wasn't I talking about something like this a few weeks ago?
And then you spoke about a game that just has one loop. That's the same game loop over and over again.
So what you're saying...
I understand the irony, but I did point out that it had an ending, and I limited myself to that.
So what you're saying, integot had the power to end it all. And
he did. He had the power to end it all. He did. And he did end it all.
You didn't get
and
the
he feels
true
so
ending,
much better
so
about
it's not
himself.
the real ending. Well, I think that's good timing on your part. So let's jump in to your hands-on experience with the PS5.
Yes. Quite literally my hands-on experience. I had to fiddle with it and touch it and caress it and sniff its plasticky odors. All right. So let's start off with the cliche, which everyone's been talking about, and that's the size of the console.
And context for the audience, you're like not a short guy. You're like 6 foot or something like that, 180 something
about
centimeters, right? But you have massive hands, like
and 8 inches.
Huge
my hands are pretty big.
Huge hands.
Well, I wouldn't say huge hands.
Whenever we see images of hands,
they're significantly sized.
Whenever we see joke images of big hands, we always say it's your hands because they are like disproportionately big.
Well, the disproportionate depends what we're talking about here. But yes, they're
okay. Go on, family.
They're decent sized. I've never had anyone complain about them. So, and look, I am into small form factor PCs as well. So
that's quite funny,
I try to sort of shrink as much as I can of the hardware that I have to get it as little as possible. So this thing is definitely large compared to previous consoles that I've had. And it's been a bit of an issue in the sense that I haven't really even had a place to put it. So I had to get this little makeshift stand thing to be able to support the thing, just so it can sit next to my TV, because otherwise I just didn't have anywhere to put it.
So
It
can I
sort
just
of
ask, are you
Yeah.
putting it vertically? So you don't want to put it horizontally?
Yeah, no, I put it vertically. So no, I tried horizontally, but it's just not enough room in my cabinet. I mean, it fits.
Really? Even
just-
horizontally?
No, it fits. But I especially because of building PCs and stuff, I'm very conscious of airflow.
Yeah.
And I see too many people just shoving their consoles into a small cabinet with absolutely no airflow. The back of it is probably closed. Might have a tiny hole for the cables to run through, something like that. And it just, it rubs me the wrong way. I like to just give it proper airflow, make sure that it
these
gets
new
adequate.
consoles that just seem to have so much more going on in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, it's been engineered, no doubt, to withstand stuff like that. I'm sure the engineers at Sony went, well, not everyone's going to be conscious of the amount of airflow they have on these things. We better design it so it's not going to, completely shut down or break because of thermal issues. But I just wasn't comfortable with that, so I just put it upright. And it does look cool. And, we'll talk about the design aspects, which are subjective, but we can talk about that in a bit as well. And I did see it compared to a Series X, which actually surprised me. So the Series X was smaller than I thought it would be in person. The PlayStation is exactly the size that I thought it would be based on all the videos and stuff that I've seen. When you watch something on a video, but you don't really... I didn't watch it in depth enough to sort of go, oh, look, relative to the guy that's doing the review, it's about this size. I didn't think of it like that. I kind of just this mental model in my head of, it's about this size. And when I got it, it was exactly the size that I thought it would be. Whereas with the Xbox Series X, it was surprising. When I saw it at the store in person, it just looked smaller than I thought it would be for some reason.
It does look
It's
smaller,
really compact. It's amazing. I actually think it's
like a little chunky, unit.
Router unit thing. I don't know. It's fantastic. I actually look. I know we're talking about the PlayStation here, but with the Series X, it blows me away the amount of engineering that must have gone into cramming all that into such a relatively tiny form factor. I mean, when I think about my small form factor PC, granted, you could probably argue it's got better performance than the Series X, but not by much. It's still physically quite a lot bigger. Yes, it's got better cooling and everything else, but physically it's a lot chunkier. And when I think about how much tech and how much thinking must have gone into cramming all that into such a tiny little thing, it's amazing. And it sucks that, of
you
course,
don't have the benefit of creating your own chipsets to scale, and you're having to work.
Of course, it's absolutely different. Yeah, absolutely. But I still think in terms of thermals and in terms of performance, or more so in terms of size to performance ratio, it just blows anything out of the water. It's amazing. And the only thing I can kind of compare it to is, I guess, the Lego. We didn't really talk about this, but I recently built my own PC out of Lego. And
I was waiting for the plugs.
The plugs, and it's not a plug because I'm not advertising anything.
No one knows. Need plugs from you, not the other way around.
No one knows where I host this or anything, or where my photos are.
You're getting better reach than us, so you need to give us
better reach.
You guys want me to plug you? Okay.
I'm randomly on Reddit and Volkswagen and stuff like that, and I'm reading Mike's posts on the front page.
So I made this.
You built a very cool Lego PC.
Built a PC out of Lego, and I made it as small as I possibly could, I think, with the parts that I had. And I guess the cool thing about Lego is you can customize the shape to fit exactly the size that you want. And I couldn't really physically, given the size of the power supply and the way pieces had to be laid out, get it smaller than that. And I think it's still larger than the Xbox Series X. In fact, it definitely is larger. And that's, because I wanted to add a bit more cooling and stuff as well. So I just absolutely amazing job that the engineers at Microsoft did to be able to get something that small. But back to the PlayStation, which is what we're talking about. It's not really that much bigger, right? It's still the fact that you can play some of the games that I've been playing on a console that is still smaller than any PC that you generally get on the market is still mind-blowing. All the tech that's still crammed into that is just fantastic. So I'm not trying to say that Microsoft did a much better job, which in a way they did, because I guess they got a much smaller console with roughly the same performance. But the engineers at Sony also did a fantastic job with the actual unit itself. So that's the size. Little bit big, but it's not really the end of the world. I think what's probably more important, though, to discuss, which might affect some people as well, is the design. I personally like the design. I still prefer the minimalistic sort of design that the Xbox Series X has, and that's probably because I'm getting old and I just like things to be a bit more simple. But the fact that the PlayStation has that, and Swinny, you would probably love this in a way. It's got that sort of Mass Effect-y aesthetics. That's sci-fi-ish, clean.
I think it looks cool. I just don't know if it, like, I have to see one in person to see if I think the coolness outweighs, it's the functionality, as you said, in terms of, I can put it this way and things like that. From a look, my favorite looking console is still the Xbox One X, no joke.
It's fantastic.
Although
Really?
the SNES is, Xbox
If
that
X.
thing
I'm the same.
It's crazy. Like, you look at it and it's just like
It's just simple. It's just a black monolith.
Simple, but it's kind of like, anyway, that's a separate thing. But
I'm like
I just
literally
wanted
going,
to say,
what am I like missing with this? This is just like a VCR, man. Like,
I didn't think that
It's
until I
the
actually
simplicity.
had got one in my hands in person when I first got it.
Dude,
Because
you like
I was
minimalist
saying,
design.
no, it's just
as do I,
just something about it is just so well made. But anyway,
Hmm.
with the PS5, like, it definitely has that Mass Effect-y look to it, which is cool. I do like
I think it's actually cool. Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't really fit with anything that I currently have in my place, but then I'm renting, and compared to my previous place where I actually renovated the whole thing and I did everything exactly what I wanted to, down to the exact shade of gray on the wall, with this place it's like, whatever, I don't really care. It's just the practicality of it. So I definitely have a different mindset now, where design maybe isn't as important from an aesthetics perspective. It becomes more important from, where do I fit this thing? And is it too big? And is the design a little too, I wouldn't say, it's not so much that it's bulky, it's that it's just got, none of the lines are straight on it. So when you get something like the Series X, or you get something like the Xbox One, and I guess to some extent even the previous gen PlayStations, you take it out of the box and you can kind of just put it somewhere and it's fine. You don't even have to put a stand. You don't have to really muck around with any of that stuff. I guess you probably do need to put a stand if you wanted the Xbox One to sit vertically, but with this, it's just every line is smooth and rounded, and you need that specially designed, which I didn't quite see the details of it, but you can see a lot of engineering just went into designing just that stand. And it's not a big deal. I mean, it takes 2 seconds to really install that thing, but it definitely isn't the same feel of, I can just take this thing and just put it wherever and it fits horizontally, vertically. I don't really need to think about it too much. There was definitely a hell of a lot more thinking that I had to do for this one.
Because you know, one thing, just like, so for me personally, I think the design looks really, really cool. Like, one thing that I do have an issue with, I just think it's too big for all the setups that I have. And I do think I'll probably just wait for a revision that will be smaller.
Yeah, it'll come.
Like, gaming obviously has come a long way, where it's not like, judged as much as it used to be, but there is still some level of judgment that I do find. Like, even at work, if the topic of gaming comes up, it's a bit like kind of frowned upon, to be honest. And one thing that I wonder, though, is it like the design? It's very loud, right? Like, you go into someone's living room, and because it's so big,
you will see it.
You'll see it. You know what I mean? And I kind of wonder, not the core gamers, but the people who are more in the mainstream, if they look at it and they're almost, embarrassed is the wrong word, but it's kind of like maybe it will be a bit too much of a focal point for people.
Yeah, for some people it would be. It's absolutely a focal point. If you walk into the room, well, actually, if you walk into the living room, the first thing you'd probably go, that TV. But then you'd go, that console is kind of out of place. Yeah. And you absolutely would get that. But I mean, in the end, it's your console, it's your house.
Sure.
So, integot, in what you just said there, do you reckon it's better or worse than the original George Foreman grilled PS3 design in that regard? of it looking out of place, and because to me
Oh.
that is the worst looking of the big consoles. That design,
The PS3? Oh,
the
man.
original PS3.
I'd have to think about the worst ones and the best ones. I was just thinking about the best ones before. I still think the GameCube's the best looking console that I've seen, but
It's so compact and
going to like the PS5, I think the PS5's definitely louder than the PlayStation
absolutely.
3. I mean, even
Yeah.
the fact that my dad had the original PS3 and he was fine with it just sitting there, whereas the PlayStation 5, I think he'd just be like, this is over the top. You know, like I'm just kind of thinking about it through that lens. Like I think it's the loudest console,
It depends
like
on
mainstream console that I've seen.
It absolutely is, but I think it also depends on the aesthetics of the rest of your room. If I could totally see this fitting in some really cool modern rooms.
I could totally see this fitting in Commander Shepard's.
In Commander Shepard's bedroom, yeah.
His room.
Next to his fish.
But I never thought about that. Like some people care a lot about that style stuff, and yeah, it's super loud. It's pretty dominant.
Well, some people want that actually when you think about it. It would be, but some people actually probably take pride in having something like that. The complete opposite of what you just said, where they do want to show something like that off, and they like the uniqueness of the design. So look, it's horses for courses. The reality is, in the end, I appreciate it. I appreciate the design when you look at it. It's not something I really care about. The last time I looked at my other consoles was so long ago that I barely remember what they look like if I was to really describe them in detail. Because once you set it up and that initial hype or care about whether it's vertical, horizontal, yada, 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 you just play the games, really. It's what it's there for, not for you to keep looking at every day. So I think, yeah, it's not a real issue once you get over that part. But yeah, amazing console in terms of overall, I think in terms of design and what they've achieved with it. So why don't I talk about something else that is really amazing that I absolutely do love, and that is the controller. So I might, however, start with a few negatives just to get those out of the way. One of the biggest things that I've noticed, and I'm hoping it's either a weird user error or something else that I don't know, wasn't set up correctly or whatever, but battery life really seemed to be bad on this particular controller. Now, I don't know if that's because it didn't charge properly, but to illustrate, I thought it had completely charged the batteries before I started playing Demon Souls, which I'll get into in a sec. I only got about 2 hours and 30 minutes out of the game according to the menu, which tells you how long you've been playing for, out of which, honestly, I reckon probably only about 2 hours, if that was actual gameplay, because of a bunch of it was just sitting in the menus and stuff while I was getting coffee and whatnot. And then it came up with the warning saying my batteries were low.
I've heard mixed things with this. I've heard
that
mixed
is really
things.
weird.
So it's going to be interesting to see where the consensus lands on it.
But it is better than the DualShock 4, which is
I
about
never had a
20
problem
hours.
though. Well, I never had an issue with the DualShock 4 in terms of, I mean, yeah, okay, compared to say, and this is completely subjective in the sense that I never, took Excel out and jotted down exactly how many hours I got out of it and how much did it rumble versus didn't, how much did I set at menus, etc. So it's completely unscientific. But I find with the DualShock, I never really had an issue. It came up, I plugged it in, it wasn't too bad. With the Xbox One, because I use any loops, I always had a steady supply where I just swapped them out the moment it came out. And I think because I use the Xbox probably more than the PlayStation, in fact, I definitely would use it more than the PlayStation, I would have noticed that a bit more. But it was never an issue because you quickly swap the batteries out, sometime go charge another 4 of them, and off you go. I never really had a problem. But with this, 2.5 hours just is completely way too little. Now, I have heard that maybe, because I was asking a few friends about this who also managed to get their hands on the PlayStation, and they said they didn't really experience the same sort of thing. Yes, it's a bit short, but they were still playing for quite a while and it wasn't as big of an issue. So they said that it might be, and for anyone listening, this might be useful, it might be that sometimes it doesn't charge properly when the PlayStation's in rest mode.
Yes.
I don't know if that's the case.
That seems to be a thing that people are talking about.
I've gone through the settings because when you go to initialize the PlayStation, it does actually say, hey, what do you want the power settings to be? And I did the custom one where I said, let me use the USB and allow controllers to be charged when it's in rest mode. You can set all that up, and it was definitely on. And you can actually say it is doing it because much like the DualShock, it flashes orange like the light that's around the trackpad flashes orange when it's charging, and I definitely saw it do that. So it wasn't like I was completely stupid about it. So maybe it just stops after a while, or something else weird is going on. In any case, it's definitely something that I've noticed. So I barely used it, and I already had to charge it up 3 times. Or I think I was charging it up 3 times,
I think
according to what it was saying.
It seems to not be charging fully.
It drops the charge or something. Something must be happening, yeah.
Because like everything I'm reading, like basically the worst case scenario, it lasts for 4 hours. And that's like playing Astro Playroom.
With all the rumble features.
Yeah, exactly, which is over the top. So it's either you got a dud DualSense or it's not charging fully.
I'll look into it.
It's clearly user error. You're just not holding it right.
Obviously that. Well, actually, speaking of holding, so the other thing about holding it is, again, because I'm talking about the negatives, not a major thing at all, but I might as well talk about the details. It's got this, so it feels really good in your hands. And as we said, I do have big hands. So it's fascinating. If it feels well to me, I wonder how it feels with people with smaller hands.
Yeah, I reckon it's too big for me because I've got smaller hands. And
I think you'll be all right. Once you try it, you'll see it's not like it's not big for me or anything like that. It feels, in fact, it's maybe a little small.
You're probably like, this is what it feels like for mere mortals to have a controller.
No, it feels good in that sense. The slight thing that is ever so slightly uncomfortable, but again, I'll get used to it. It's not a big deal. Is where the cutout. It's sort of got like a bit of it's hard to explain where your pinky sit.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about it that doesn't feel, because it's not smooth. It's not completely smooth in that part.
Yeah, it's a bit sharp, isn't it?
It's a bit sharp and edgy in that bit. And
so
I didn't notice that.
Where your pinky sits.
Where my particular pinky. And again, it's like...
In Japan, I could just imagine them going, well, no human hands can touch these edges, so let's make it like design well and sharp.
That's exactly what probably happened. And look, you have to design these things. It's not like I don't know, a pair of earphones where they give you 10 different types of plugs that you can use for all sorts of different ears. These things have to work for everyone. And not only does the engineering behind... Well, first of all, the engineering is amazing. I've seen some teardowns of this thing, and it's just mind-blowing, the tech that they've put into these controllers. But the fact that they need to design these things to work for just about any hand size out there, that's amazing. And the fact that unanimously, pretty much everyone just says it's an absolutely fantastic controller just goes to show how well they've actually designed this thing. So those are the negatives. I think they're not deal breakers. Where the battery life is going to be really annoying if that is a real problem, because 2.5 hours out of a game is sort of a little too much. But at the same time, maybe that's an incentive to put it down, go and do something else for a bit, and then come back and continue playing, so you don't sit there playing the game for 10 hours. But some of the positives, which I think are more important and far outweigh the negatives, is, first of all, it feels really good in the hand. It's extremely well built. The closest thing that I would compare it with is obviously the DualShock 4, because it's an evolution of that. But if I was to compare it to what was my previous favorite controller, which is the Xbox One controller, which I think was, to this day, still the best controller ever made, other than, I guess, now this baby, it just feels so well built. The plastic feels good. The quality, when you look at the details of the way it's been put together, the gaps, it's not a Tesla 3 is all I can say. So I don't know if you guys have seen. They're not just memes. I've seen this in real life. We have a mutual friend whose identity I won't reveal, but his parents own a Tesla 3.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, and whilst when I was in it, I think they're fantastic cars, don't get me wrong. You definitely notice the panel work. So yeah, I noticed
like 80s panel work.
It's
they haven't gone through the generations yet.
Yeah.
So is it clearly better than a DualShock 4? Because that's my main
for me,
kind of
it absolutely is. Yeah, it is. Okay. It's also weightier, which I prefer. I like the
more
fact
premium.
More premium in that sense, yeah. And I do wonder if that will cause people to have a bit more fatigue. And one of the things that I might as well just talk about now, which is the rumble effects. Speaking of fatigue, I do wonder if in the long run, because of all the added rumble that this thing does, whether that will lead to a bit more fatigue in people's hands. I mean, that remains to be seen.
So I've already seen quite a few reports of this in the case of people playing Call of Duty for long hours and stuff. But the one thing we need to flag right away is you can disable it.
Of course, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But when you say
But
disable it,
kind
is
of
it
loses.
like binary, like it's on or off, or is it
No,
like, full
Not
vibration
sure.
or like
you
low?
can lower the vibration. So I
Oh, you
forget,
can. That's good.
whether it was Valhalla
Yeah.
or Demon Souls, but most games that I start, I tend to go through the settings and sort of see what's available. And one of
Yeah.
them had the ability, and I think a lot of games, not a lot of games, but I have seen games in the past where there's a slider usually that has the rumble feature, and do you want it super strong or very light? And you can probably, take it down a few notches and mitigate some of that issue.
So
But
just with the DualSense, like, and just
yeah,
linking it in with one of the games, did you play Astro's
Astro?
Playroom, which is
Yes,
kind of
that was
like,
the first thing
yeah,
I did. Yeah.
yeah.
So
So how
it
was
is.
it?
It's like what they say. Again, I don't
Yeah.
mean to be a cliche. I'm sure a
No,
lot of people that are listening to this have probably heard this a million times
that's
already.
fine.
It feels great.
Mm.
It wasn't as mind blowing as I think some people made it out to be, but it absolutely is an evolution of the current controller. It felt really cool. Just the effects of pulling things, the different materials when you walk on different types of surfaces. It definitely feels different, and it feels really, really good. And not just the rumble, but the triggers as well, which I guess falls into a similar category. They're actually, it's got a how do I explain it? So traditionally you've got normal triggers like you'd have on the Switch, which is basically digital. It's on or off. Then you've got the analog that you have on the DualShock 4, you've got on the Xbox, 360, Xbox One, etc., that are analog, so you can control how much input you want to have. And then you've got this, which is nuts. It actually controls how much of the force behind the trigger. So it feels like you're actually pulling a trigger. So I haven't played COD. That's one game that I didn't grab because you know me and those kind of games. We've spoken about this before. I would love to see what it's like though, and whether they've implemented different trigger feels for different guns, because it's actually really incredible.
So from what I've heard, that it will have different resistances and definitely based on the weapon types. But
That's amazing,
that
though.
is it is the one case where so far the biggest example where I've heard people just turning it off, because
I can imagine, yeah.
when you're talking about people that are super into that stuff, it's almost like, well, it's more resistance,
It's
against
exactly,
their input.
yeah,
So,
yeah. And
it's like cool
it's a
feature, but
disadvantage.
like I can also understand why people wouldn't want to actually use it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, this is kind of it.
that's like, with Smash, I turn off vibration and rumble because it interferes with the way I play it. But that makes it less immersive. But I think for the mainstream audience, the fact that you can have this crazy thing of the gun, in a game could jam, and then the actual
You can't
trigger
press the trigger,
is
right?
like so
Yeah.
much harder. You know what I mean?
That's amazing.
Like that's cool. Like that
It is really cool.
really
Yeah.
simple things like that can bring out a level of immersion in a game that, and then add it to something like VR in the future when they finally announce and release PSVR 2. I don't know, it's pretty cool, that kind of stuff.
It's a way deeper experience than what you currently have. Absolutely.
I could see it working really well in a game like Far Cry 2, along those lines, where the gun would jam in the game itself, or break, and
That'd be
then
sick.
suddenly, or
There's a lot of uses for this.
like a weapon breaks, in your Demon Souls or something like that. I'm not sure how that stuff works, so maybe
I
you'll,
wonder if they've
give some
implemented that
insight.
actually. I'll have a crack. I don't recall that Demon Souls, which I'll talk about in more detail, actually implements the Force as much, or maybe I just didn't. I wasn't conscious to it doing it. So now that you mentioned it, I might actually give it a crack and see if it feels different. I mean, the vibrations certainly feel different. And I'll go into that in more detail. But there's other games. So
just on Astro's Playroom, how far did you get into it? Because
I didn't get
that's
super
one game
far
I'd be
because
super keen to play.
I didn't get super far. It's one of those games that I think I will definitely finish. Not just because of I don't think it's gimmicky per se. I mean, it's definitely a tech demo in that sense. They've done. You can tell it's designed to showcase everything about the PlayStation. From, I think, don't quote me on this, the ray tracing it probably has. I wouldn't be
It would have
surprised if
everything.
it doesn't. Obviously, the controller, everything about it, from the gyros to the rumble to the triggers, it's all there. But it's actually a really fun experience to play. So no doubt I will actually play it. So I did the intro bits, and then I had to move on to the other games, which I'll talk about as well.
I saw that there's a level called SSD Speedway, which is pretty cool.
Oh, the SSD. Yeah, we'll should talk about the SSD as well. Remind me, because that's one thing that again people talked about, and I did notice it, and it is quite amazing. Just really quickly back on the triggers and the rumble. One of the things that I think would be interesting to see how it gets implemented is in a game like Gran Turismo. If the gyros work on that to be able to steer the car, that would be really interesting. And the fact that if you have ABS switched off, you can lock your brakes, and having that sort of tactile feel of locking your brakes would be really, really fascinating. So I play with ABS off in games like Forza, and you have to really feather the trigger or the brakes so they don't completely lock and then you just go straight into a wall. And having that actual tactile feel to be able to better tell where that point is, where they start locking up, would be amazing. I think it'll just be a completely different experience. So I'm really keen on
like it's such a cool point. Like, and I know you're a huge racing, like more sim kind of style fan.
I like both.
Well, yeah, but you're very good at the sim stuff. Like you turn everything off and you still smash us. But you know, like you're right. Like imagine, like that is really cool. Like even the clutch and stuff like that.
Yeah,
like, they could actually implement it in a really different way that you haven't seen in gaming before. So it's just
really, really interesting. Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but I feel like ultimately it still will come back to first party games will probably take advantage of a lot of these features, and then third party, I think they're all just going to go, look, it's unless it's really easy to do, it's just all too much to do something that's too different to the other platforms.
That's a good point. Well, I'm hoping the APIs and the support that they provide should be good to the extent that it shouldn't be too hard to implement this stuff.
So what other games did you play on it?
So well, good segue. So I don't know how to break this down, but I can probably break it down into 4 types of games that I played, and then I can go into the details of each.
How many games did you get on this thing?
Well, I'll tell you why I got multiple games. I'll explain that in a sec. But the 4 types are as follows. So I got Valhalla on PS4, wanting to see what it's like to get the free PS5 upgrade, and also because it was $10 cheaper. So basically you get a PS4 copy, and in the case of that, I think Legion also has it, Far Cry 6 is going to have it. You can just use a PS4 copy and you automatically get upgraded to the PS5 version of it. And if you want to save some money, that's probably a good way of doing it. Maybe some resale value because there's more PS4 owners, so maybe there's a bigger market for it. Plus, PS5 games are still relatively expensive in most cases, although in the case of Valhalla, it was only $10 more, so it wasn't a huge deal. And I did manage to pick it up for 61 koala bucks, which that's Valhalla, which is nice. Fairly cheap when you think about it for what is technically a next-gen game, given the free upgrade, compared to Demon's Souls, which was $109, and I just went, screw it, I need to play this game. I paid that, no problem.
And that was like
$109.
Dude, that was the cheapest price. That's the cheapest price
Oh
you
my
have.
God.
Yeah. Like normal,
They're
it's like
120. They're 125, I think. 125 RRP, at EB Games. I just price matched it with.
This really is the next generation, isn't it?
Well, but again, it's they're well, I wouldn't say they're the. they're not so much the exceptions, because there's other games at that price, but a lot of the bigger titles were cheaper than that.
Well, so, I think one thing though, I think what is happening in Australia, and this is more the Australian context, US, pretty much all these big games are going up by $10. So they're going from $60 to $70. Whereas here, because our currencies moved and fluctuated versus when the PS4 and Xbox One came out, I think they're using this as a bit of a hard reset on pricing in Australia for these big titles.
Absolutely have, yeah. Well, we've been lucky in the past. There's so many games that were coming out at release for $69, which is like, what, 40 something US?
You got Valhalla for 61 koala
61
bucks, as you said.
Yeah.
That's $45 US.
Yeah.
People in the States, if they hear that, like,
I know, right?
A AAA title for 45, they're like, what the hell?
I mean,
it's
granted, it was a slight loophole, and JB had that deal on, and there was an upgrade and everything. But still, you're playing a next gen game for $45 US. Which
it's a rude awakening, man.
It's
good. Like, it's another thing that just makes me nervous about next gen. It's like, I feel like the games are going to be pretty much standard $90 Australian.
Oh, absolutely. I think they will be.
Which
at
is
least
probably cheaper than the States, amazingly.
Kind of is, but I think and we are paying an extra koala tax as well, because an extra $10 is not an extra $25 in Australia. Maybe an extra, not even $20, right? Given the exchange rate, they've really added all that extra to this that it's just a little too much, I think, even when you take GST into account and all that.
Yeah, it's a shock.
I don't know whether that's going to impact sales. Yeah, we'll see how all of that pans out. I mean, there's not enough games at the moment to see the big impact anyway, and there's not enough people who have a PlayStation 5.
Do we know what the Sackboy, like I'm just thinking another first party title that's not Astro, which is a pack-in, or Miles Morales, which I think was already priced slightly lower.
Yeah, that's lower as well.
Sackboy was priced lower in the States as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Demon's Souls is kind of the exception to everything, isn't it?
At the moment, I feel like that's the exception.
No. So just on that, they've said that's going to be the standard price for their big games, like the God of Wars and things like that.
Yeah.
And then they're going to look at it title by title. So things that are maybe a lot easier to get up and running, they're going to price a little bit lower.
Makes sense.
But they actually were debating, like there was a really good article recently with Gamasutra where they were debating about making it more expensive than the $10 increase.
Wow.
Yeah, they were debating $75 or $80.
Is that because they're worried that loot boxes and all that stuff won't fly in a lot of regions anymore, and that they have to actually
I think
make their money from the initial sale as opposed to trying to...
The other thing is, the reality is the development is more expensive. You cannot say it's not.
Of course. Absolutely.
So,
it absolutely is. Yeah. You need way more people. The tech's more expensive. Engines are more expensive, etc.
So Valhalla, you got Demon's Souls.
So I got Valhalla,
which did you get?
Because I wanted to see the transition, and I know Swinny talked about it in some detail. I haven't gone quite as far as you. It looks fantastic, obviously, as you'd expect. It definitely looks like it's a next-gen title. It runs at 60 frames on the PS5 at 4K. At least it seems to be 4K. The resolution's really high. And I was quite pleased with it. So I played Origins and I played Odyssey, not nowhere near as much as you did, obviously, Swinny. So I can't comment on how much different it is, but the game felt good. It kind of maybe in a way disappointingly felt exactly like I thought it would. But I think once you get more into it, it should be a pretty solid game. Absolutely. I mean, it's Assassin's Creed. They've been pretty solid games for a while. The only thing that I personally find, and maybe that's because I'm a little more time poor, is I got overwhelmed by that game. Even just like you said, the starting area was so big that I got deflated and overwhelmed. And in the back of my mind, I'm sitting there thinking, man, I don't have the time and the hours required to really do this game justice. And it sadly actually put me off the game a little bit.
So one thing that I'll talk about next week will be the changes that they've really made to how exploration works, and I think it's actually for the better in that regard to exactly what you're saying. So,
okay, cool. Yeah. I'd be keen to hear
just
that.
going to
maybe let me on the podcast. Maybe I can talk about it as well. Who knows?
Just going to the next gen features. So, Swinny, did you notice load screens in Valhalla on the One X?
Yeah, of course, but Assassin's Creed's always strange in the sense that the whole game's open world. So if you don't fast travel anywhere, you're not going to see a load screen. So as soon as you fast travel somewhere, you see a load screen. But generally, so it's kind of a weird test case for that.
So like loading the game up, you'll see all that kind of stuff. But if you're just going around exploring, not so much. And then Mike, did you feel many load screens?
I don't know how to... So that's the thing. I think it's that quote from Futurama when Bender meets God, and God says something along the lines of, you can be sure you've done things right when no one notices you've done anything at all. I think that's so applicable to this because I did not notice loading times. I think it's so fast that
but did you fast travel anywhere?
Stuff.
Did you fast travel?
No, I didn't fast travel yet. So I need to try something like that. But just loading into the game, loading into things, starting, loading the game up again was so quick. And I'll talk about Demon's Souls in more detail, but that one I did notice because consciously in the back of my mind, I was trying to remember how long it would take other similar games. I don't remember Demon's Souls on the PS3 clearly enough to remember the loading times, but I do remember it had significant loading times. But it's so fast, just going from the Nexus to another going through one of the stones of back, it's crazy fast, and especially given what it needs to load. And when you look at the textures that are being used and the geometry of the levels, it's insane how fast this thing loads. Absolutely insane. So with Valhalla, I'll go back and I'll kind of do some fast travel just to see how that works. But it wasn't anything that was noticeably needing to load. It's very snappy, which is fantastic. Anyway, do you guys have anything else in terms of Valhalla that you wanted to talk about?
No, I'm just interested in what other games you played, and definitely
right. So the next one I tried was the other thing I wanted to try is just to see what some of the previous gen games. So you guys would probably, in fact, I'm sure you know, there's a selection of I don't know off the top of my head. There's about 20 odd titles.
There are 20, yeah.
20. There you go. Perfect. That was a guess. 20 odd titles from PS4 that if you've got PS Plus, which I do, you can play for free. And I thought
that you can add to your account.
You actually, that's right. You add them to your account.
That's right. You can always play them, and you can play them on your PS4 now as well.
That's right. Yeah, which is kind of weird because you have to add them and then you have to download them, whereas you think you just download them, but they're not. You actually just add them as games to your account. Yeah.
And I was going to talk about this later in the bargain bin, but we'll do it now. This is really sneaky, but I might get you, or maybe when I'm in Melbourne, for me to log into your PS5, because one thing that we've all found out now is that you can only do this on the PS5 itself. You cannot do this through the web app or through the app or anything. So if I log in with my account on your PS5, I can add those 20 games to my profile.
Wow.
And then they'll be on there and I can play them on the PS4.
Okay.
There's a couple of games like
if
Persona.
It's not breaching anything, why not?
Yeah. I haven't played before, so I'm like, I might do that. That's a real sneaky
Well, that's
trick.
the thing. I haven't. Yeah, I never played God of War. Shame. Days Gone. Detroit. I've actually got physical copies of all of those games, and I've never played them. Some of them are still shrink wrapped, which is a bit stupid.
Yeah.
So
anyway, so I thought, going, hey, I might sell them because you know what I mean. What am I ever going to use them for? Then?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I traded some games for the PS5, and I don't remember. I think God of War may have been one of them. I think Detroit may have been one of them. I traded some of those games, thinking exactly that. What's the point of keeping them when I can get rid of them for like $40? So. Anyway, so Bloodborne was the next one that I thought I'd try, and it's interesting because I don't know if there's a performance mode or something that I wasn't seeing, or they'll patch it up later. That ran at 30 frames, so it didn't really feel next Genny to me or anything.
Can I just talk about this a bit?
Yep.
So obviously, Bloodborne's part of this PS Plus collection, right? But people just automatically assuming Bloodborne is going to run at 60 frames per second and then getting disappointed is ridiculous.
No, I never assumed that. But I think it's
I think it is a little bit disappointing that they haven't unlocked it, right?
It was disappointing for that game, yeah.
No, so the thing is, people assuming it would be the case, I think is ridiculous, because we know that from software games, generally, like, you know, we talked about, you know, Dark Souls 2, like, a lot of there's work that needs to be done there. So unless they've come out and actually said, we've patched this game and it's going to unlock it, blah blah blah. I think to just assume it's going to run at 60. I think.
Well, but I think it's a safe assumption for the average person to make. I mean, we know Bloodborne and a lot of From games, even down to the fact that, you know, there was that issue when it went to 60 frames that equipment was degrading quicker because some of the calculations and stuff are based on the frame rate or some weird thing like that was going on. But the average consumer wouldn't know that. The average consumer, I think, hears that.
Like, I think I'm talking about people that actually should generally know what they're talking about.
Yeah, look, maybe those people, yeah. But anyone kind of just going, hey, I got this free game called Bloodborne, I'll check it out. They will kind of expect, because the general consensus, I think, on the internet seems to be the PS5 will run your PS4 games much better unless it's got a locked 30 frames. And this obviously has a locked 30 frames, because otherwise it should have potentially run faster. So I wasn't disappointed or anything like that. I purely did it because I wanted to see what was there. And again, maybe there's an option that I didn't see, but somehow I doubt that. I think it's just they haven't patched that up yet. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do bother patching that. But I don't think it's as simple as, hey, let's just unlock the frame rates and put it to 60 frames. Because again, there's certain things and animations and stuff that are bound to the frame rate that the game is running at, and you can't just muck around unlocking that because you might run into a whole bunch of issues. So there's all sorts of testing they need to do. But it would definitely be something that I would love to revisit at 60 frames, only because whilst I'd love to go back through Bloodborne again, I don't have that incentive when there's all these other games. But if it ran at 60, oh boy, that could be a really interesting experience, just seeing what it's like when it's a lot more fluid. Now, that brings me to the next game, which was God of War, that I thought I'd also test. So I played it in the past, but I didn't get super far into it. Not because I didn't love it, because it's an amazing game. I just had too much other stuff to play. This actually has a performance mode at 60 FPS. It is only 1080p, and you definitely notice the difference. So going from what I assume is a full 4K or 1440p upscale, I'm not entirely sure what it uses natively at the higher fidelity setting, but you do notice that drop in resolution going to the 60 FPS performance mode. However, it more than makes up for how fluid the game becomes.
Do we know if that performance mode is new to it being playable on PS5, or if it's just PS Pro's options that were there for that?
That's a very good point. With this particular one, I don't know. Okay. I remember seeing some video about it, but I don't remember exactly what the details were, whether it's something that you're right or was already on the Pro. I have a feeling it might not have been, and pardon to anyone listening that is now jumping up and down screaming, you're an idiot, you haven't looked into this. It might have it, but I feel like it might not have had that solid 60 FPS. But I don't know. I'd love to actually look it up after this. But to me personally,
the option was PS4 Pro. It's because of the Pro
that had 60?
that they had it, yeah. And it's really cool. Like a lot of these things, I think it's more dependent on, did they have an uncapped frame rate version of that mode? So any game that had like an uncapped frame rate mode will just run in backwards compatibility, and then it will just amp it up.
Cap at 60,
yeah. Whereas like what Swinny was saying earlier, some of the games they tested and they're like, yep, sweet, we can have a solid 30 FPS, let's just do that, and not even allow it to be uncapped. So it's a lot of work to uncap it. I mean, I get people are annoyed, but it's not free. It will cost them a lot of money to go play test it, do all that kind of stuff.
Oh, of course it would. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's like, again, I think going back to the equipment degradation thing, and I don't know if that's exactly what caused it, but it might be related to something like the frame rate. The fact that some weird little glitch like that can happen as a result of going between 30 and 60 is fascinating. There's all these other things that could happen as a result. But personally, and if you look at someone like Digital Foundry, I think they echo thoughts like this as well. 60 FPS at a lower res still feels better than 30 FPS at whatever res you want to give me. And that's purely because the ghosting and the blur you get at 30 FPS, at least on my TV, and I'd imagine it happens on a lot of other TVs, is far worse than going slightly lower resolution, but it runs smoothly at 60.
So that's a beautiful segue, because I wanted to ask you both, and then, look back, I guess, where I land on it. But, I guess there's 3 modes or 3 divides, where one is, are you the kind of person that always goes to performance mode? So it's like always maxing out the frame rate or maxing out the look and feel, or is it depending on the game? So where do you land on that, Mike?
So I can't think of specific cases to say, does it depend on the game? All I know is, given the choice, by far more often than not, from memory, I would always go performance. Always. Yeah,
so you'd rather like 1080p.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
60 FPS. Than 4K
even on my 4K TV. So I guess it also depends, do you have a 4K TV or not? If you don't have a 4K TV, then it's a no-brainer. Just go performance mode in most cases. And if you don't know that there's that higher resolution that's got higher fidelity at the 30, and you're not, if you're ignorant to that, then you're always going to enjoy 60 FPS more in that sense. But going between them, yes, you do notice that there's certain graphical things that have to be reduced from that to performance mode. But again, personal preference, the ghosting that's introduced by 30 FPS, at least on my TV, and I think it would happen to a lot of people on a lot of people's TVs, is way worse, I think, than any resolution drop, because you might get a lower res, a higher res, but if your screen is a smear fest every time you pan the camera, you kind of don't really achieve anything in the end. It's beautiful on a still, like if you're just looking at a still image, or if you're not moving your character around, absolutely amazing, looks way better at the higher resolution. And it probably has added effects that they've had to tone down and turn off or reduce on performance mode, but it doesn't make up for it. unfortunately, because most games there's movement, and with movement, it's just so much more jarring. And again, I realized that, if you asked me this question maybe 5-10 years ago, 30 FPS, perfectly fine. Yes, I appreciated 60 FPS, but a lot of games were running at 30, and my brain just adjusts to that, and I put up with whatever, things my TV couldn't handle. But now that you can consistently get 60 FPS on a lot of games, and especially if you play on PC and, you get minimum 60 on a lot of stuff, it's hard for your brain, now that it's been so privileged this entire time, to go back to 30 and enjoy that experience. It's just jarring. It's really, really annoying and crap.
And where do you land on it, Swinny?
There is no exception. Performance every time.
Hell yeah.
I'm kind of surprised. I thought you would have been like maybe dependent on the game.
I've talked constantly about my disappointment that we weren't already at 60 at a minimum for last gen. Like
aren't you listening?
I'm
Come
now
on, man.
if
mentioned
you
this multiple times on this podcast.
Now, I will
Wait. Let me address that. I feel like it's a debate. So
Jesus Christ, man, listen to this podcast, will ya?
No, but I think there's also like, hey, would you want something that's like 1440 at 60 versus 1080 at 120?
So that's what I was about to get to. So if you then start talking about anything beyond 60, that's where I'm not sure, because I've never played any games
so it is dependent.
that.
No, but we're talking about 3060, not 61.
Yeah, so that's why I had two parts to my answer.
No, I'm not talking 3060. I'm talking about like how you want to dial it in, like in general. Like,
do you want my answer?
Okay.
Do you want my answer?
Yeah, go on.
All right.
Yes, so I haven't played any games beyond 60 frames per second ever.
Oh God, you haven't broken the 60 cherry. Jeez.
So my point was, I can't actually talk about whether or not I would feel that the jump beyond that is worth it, because I haven't experienced it. But
I haven't. I don't think it's worth it if it's massively reduced in like so if you've got 1440p at 60 and then 1080p at 120, unless you're playing something that's super twitchy, I don't see the real point, right? 60 is a beautiful cap that already is very smooth, and TVs handle it beautifully, that you don't get a huge benefit from most.
So the only thing I have to compare is 60 and below, and like we talked about it before, where just it blew my mind. One of my most underappreciated games that we talked about, I think it was last episode, was Crime Killer on the PlayStation, and that run at nice smooth 60, and it blew my mind then. And ever since playing F-Zero X on the 64, which I think was not quite 60, but it was pretty close off the top of my head. But it was like, ever since then, whenever something hasn't been 60, I've been really disappointed, when it felt like it should have been.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is really disappointing that this generation isn't like 60 by default. Like, there's been this hyper obsession about 4K to the point where even Sony said that maybe down the track they'll look at 1440 as a resolution, but given that they're not in the monitor business, and really 1440 is a computer monitor resolution.
It's a completely computer monitor.
Like, to me, like, I would have loved if they said, hey, 1440 at 60 is like the standard. And,
because it's a good middle ground.
To 4K. You barely even can tell the difference. Like, even the Digital Foundry, which is like just such a niche but awesome YouTube channel and group, I guess you could say it. Like, even they say pretty much the checkerboarding and the up-resing and the the AI supported stuff that you can do there. It's sort of like pretty hard to tell even in stills. And now when you put it in motion, you really find it very, very difficult to tell the difference. But for me,
that would be the
like just going back
compromise
to the question, it's
that.
like, I think if it's a real twitchy game, like you're saying, Mike, like shooters, Rocket League, stuff like that, I will always sacrifice everything to make the frames max out. So like,
of course,
I have 180 hertz monitor, and I'll ramp it up to 180 Rocket League. Like, I wouldn't sacrifice
that's what I mean.
anything lower than that.
As you said, it's specific to the game, right? Rocket League is a game that you don't need. It's not about the graphics. You could literally have the ball not even with no textures on it, and the entire arena with no textures on it, and it's effectively the same game. But if you play a game that is about the graphics, and part of the experience is the graphical fidelity, then it's a totally different question, I guess.
Yeah. So,
And
but
this
it
kind
sounds
of
like we all
reminds me.
landed in the same spot actually, which
I
is
think
like
so, yeah.
60 is like it will always switch to the 60 mode.
Oh, yeah.
If they have it,
Absolutely. I wouldn't. Well, it'd have to be a real exception where it's so bad for whatever reason on performance mode at 60 that you kind of put up with the 30, but it'd be super rare. But I think this just reminds me of when you see people that play. I remember in games like, oh my gosh, what's the DayZ, and people would actually lower the resolution and not the resolution, sorry, they'll lower all their settings as much as possible to get rid of foliage, to get rid of all those elements that gives them an advantage. Because in games like that, if people begin to play them competitively, it's not so much about the graphics anymore and the immersion. It's about, I need to see the dude I'm trying to kill as easily as possible, and if that means lowering all my settings as much as possible,
Wait, did you mean PUBG? PUBG as opposed to DayZ?
I think both of them. No, I both. I mean, it's
What
PUBG,
do you mean
yeah.
both?
No, it's in. I remember it from the DayZ days when I played DayZ, and I remember those memes and those things
fair
creeping
enough,
up.
fair enough.
People surely say DayZ in Australia, yeah?
Do they? I don't know, because it's a New Zealand game technically, isn't it? So it's
Well, they
DayZ.
say Z there as well, by the way.
DayZ, bro. It's DayZ.
All right, are we gonna get Demon Souls? I think it's time to get.
Yes,
bro.
I know. Let's get to Demon Souls and wrap it up.
Bro. Yo, yeah, bro, it's the best, bro.
So have you played the
Demon Souls.
PS3 version
Okay.
of Demon Souls?
I have. So
Okay.
I am like Swinny. I absolutely love Souls-like games. And again, we're going on some tangents, but it's related because it's about Souls-like games. I have been recently playing through the Surge 2, which, funny enough about talking about the frame rates, I don't know if you noticed this as well, Swinny. It runs at a variable frame rate with a bunch of screen tearing, relatively low textures on an Xbox One X. Like, I feel like it's an enjoyable experience, but if you really think about it, it's really badly optimized for that console. Really, really badly optimized.
I was actually shocked. I thought when I jumped to it, it'd be 30. So I was actually pleasantly surprised. So I was the opposite.
It's variable, which is why I guess it introduces screen tearing and stuff like that. It's not a big deal. I actually think it's great. But for a game like that I think graphically isn't mind-blowing, running on an Xbox One X, you'd think they could, get it pretty close to locked 60 as opposed to doing what they did. So I feel like there's certain things.
It's last gen. I mean, we know that the devs were they either couldn't do it or they just didn't want to put the production time. And
maybe
the
they
money
just didn't
into
bother
it.
doing the production.
Yeah.
But you know what? Who cares? It's an amazing game. Love it. I know you're giving me shit because I haven't finished number 1. I got to the very end and I never bothered finishing it. So I think my partner just got home. So you're going to hear some background noise. Can I go on mute for a sec while you guys chat and I'll just go with the door and stuff?
So Swinny, let's talk about our experience with the PlayStation 5.
Yes.
Actually, can I talk about one thing? So I went to my little source at EB Games and they were able to confirm how many units were sold in the store of the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, which I don't think they're meant to speak about, but they did anyway. Do you want to make any guesses? So this is at a store that's like, it's not the biggest store, but it's not like one of the smaller ones either. So it's probably a middle run store, I'm guessing.
Okay.
So how many Xbox X's do you think were sold? We're just talking about how many were sold.
I reckon they sold 120.
Oh, friggin' hell. What am I doing? I forgot that I wrote it in the run sheet. Dumb.
Yeah, and I reckon PlayStation's 200.
Correct. Good guesses, guys.
Thanks,
So
man.
then I was like, okay, how many eBay games? Because I think it is an average one.
Wait, what do you mean 200? Like where?
They
As
had
in
200 that they sold that week of PlayStation 5s at the EB Games store that I go to.
Oh, the particular one that he went to. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
So then, and I think it's like an average one. I don't think it's one of the bigger ones or the smaller ones. So then I looked at it. I'm like, okay, then there's like 300 stores in Australia. And then, what do you reckon? EB is probably getting half the allocation of the PlayStation 5s in Australia?
EB, you mean?
EB.
Sorry.
No, I said EB, but
Half. I don't know. I actually legit wouldn't know because you've got JB Hi-Fi, that's the biggest competitor, but then you
Sure.
have Big W, Target, Harvey
Amazon.
Norman, Amazon. So I don't think it's half. I think it'd probably be less.
Okay. So let's just say it's a third. So that would result in ballpark like 180,000 PS5s being sold in Australia, which is pretty crazy. And then we're about 15th of the population of the States. So that would be like 2.7 million in the States. So
Don't the stats actually exist somewhere though?
No, they're not really, because what they're announcing is like in relative frame of other things. So they'll go, the PlayStation 5 has sold 1 million within 18 hours. But it's like, like, 18 hours, but like, how do you actually measure in terms of, are you saying pre-orders or, people who actually
they're all pre-orders,
it,
dude, because I don't think people could grab it. So I don't know a single person that could grab any of the consoles if they
people
didn't grab it within the first 10 minutes.
No. People could order it on the day. Like there was
for future shipments and stuff.
Okay, no, even for like this weekend. Some people
really?
Yeah.
How?
Correct.
Wow.
Ordered it on
I thought it was
Thursday.
completely sold out.
No, it depends on the
really
retailer.
cool.
Some of them like held back some of their allocation.
Oh, that's right, because some did hold back. I remember Harvey Norman and stuff had some extra stock, and I think Amazon did. Again, they went super quick. I don't even know how I got lucky with the PS5 because I had a message from my mate, and he's like, "Oh, I just pre-ordered my PS5." I'm like, "Holy smokes, it's on today!" And I feel like an ungrateful person now that I managed to get my hands on it. But trust me, I appreciate the fact that I did.
That Demon Souls, how was it?
Oh, Demon Souls. That game, okay. Oh my god, it is amazing. I know it's an overused word, but it's just wow. It's super cool. So back to where I was. Sorry, before I had to run off. I did play Demon Souls on PS3. Absolutely, I actually played it from memory. I think after I played Dark Souls. I don't know if it was Dark Souls 1 and 2. And afterwards, I went, I should really go back to my copy of Demon Souls and play that properly. Because the very first time I played it, I think I did what a lot of people probably did. And then as I started to play it, and then it was hard, and then I put it down, and I didn't get back to it. And that's such a weird thing, because when I went back to it, I don't know how many years afterwards, maybe like a couple of years after I put it down, I was super hooked. I just love those games. It's almost like, how the hell did I not stick to it the first time? They're absolutely amazing games. So I did play it. I did finish it on the PS3. And it's really fascinating playing the remake now, because I played all of Boletaria, so the very first area that you go through, and obviously the tutorial before that. And I also started on another one of the worlds. And it's interesting that your brain still remembers the mental maps that were created from the original game. So it's a very familiar experience. And obviously it's a familiar experience because they also used not the same engine per se, but the underlying, all the enemy placement, the map, the geography, the level design, the attacks, the animations that changed and stuff, but in terms of the timings and everything, that's remained exactly the same. So obviously that feels the same, but it's quite fascinating going back to it and going, I know exactly where this is. I remember the whole mental map of this particular level.
Well,
even
I
though
don't know
it's
if you know,
completely
Mike,
new.
that they actually, like the way they built this game, they took the PS3 code and then got it running on the PS5.
Yes, I did hear that, yeah.
And they do actually have the engine running in the background.
Yes. They do, yeah. But I mean, they've changed a whole bunch of other things to it. Clearly, as in the animations are different.
Yeah, but there's two engines.
But they've kept
there's
it the
the original
same.
engine and the new engine, and it like intermeshes. It's pretty cool.
It's amazing. So in terms of the game itself, and I believe you did speak about this on your previous episode, it's the first game that I tried at least. And given that there's not that many games to really be playing anyway, that actually feels next Genny. And I mean graphics. I mean loading
who's
times.
Genny?
Next Genny. You know Genny. You don't know Genny.
Keep going.
I think
You
that's
don't need
the
to
official way
acknowledge
to
my bad
describe it,
joke.
next Genny.
Thanks, Dad. So it's definitely the first game that feels next gen out of all the things that I've tried. Valhalla looks great, but it kind of feels like it's just a 60 FPS higher resolution version of a current gen game, whereas Demon Souls actually feels a proper next gen experience. Now, I've been super privileged and lucky to be able to experience the game pretty much as well as you can experience this game. So that's on a 65-inch TV in HDR. It runs at 60. I've got a 5.1 setup, cranked up. You've got the controller with the tactile feel. There was one part that actually really blew me away, and I think will last for a significant amount of time in my gaming memory, where you boot up at the start of one of the worlds, and this lightning bolt hits a tree. And the sound effects, the rumble in your hand, everything just felt absolutely amazing. It's such a cool experience that I will no doubt remember it for a long time to come. The controller actually feels really cool in this game. So when you cast a spell, it's really hard to describe, but it actually really feels like it's casting the spell in your hand, and just the sound effects and the rumble and the feel when it hits something. Not only do you get your subwoofer making that sound, but you kind of get that tactile feel in your hand at the same time.
Is it a bit like the spatial awareness in your hand?
It is. It is. You get way more immersed in that experience. And graphically, the game is just superb. It is absolutely... it's a stunning looking game, I think. The fact that it loads into the very first area of Boletaria is just nuts how quickly it loads into that. It looks like an FMV, yet it's running real time at 60 FPS. The geometry of the map is just insane. And yeah, the experience, it's one of the coolest experiences I've had in recent memory. I was actually on the fence when it came to buying it. I knew it was going to be an amazing game. But
yeah, well, that's why I was surprised when you actually got it, because I was sort of saying to you, I'm like, are you going to get that? Because that's pretty much the only game I look at and go, wow, that looks just...
You know what?
Looks next gen.
I was kidding myself. I was kidding myself that I wasn't going to get it. Of course I was going to get it. Like, I'm umming and ahhing because I'm thinking, I've got all these other games, and not just games, there's all these other projects that I'm working on that I felt I didn't really have the time to commit to it. And I knew something like Demon Souls, the moment I got it, I would be so immersed into it. And I love those games that it's really hard for me to put them down and restrict myself. And that's probably one of the reasons why. It wasn't the $109. I mean, yes, it's expensive for a new game, and it was in the back of my mind, but don't buy a bunch of coffees, save money somewhere else. You can kind of justify the extra $40 you'd normally pay for that game, I guess. But I knew it was inevitable. A game like that, come on, it's like it's absolutely sick. Such a cool game. And it's actually, I bought the initial, if I remember correctly now, I bought the PS4 because of Bloodborne. So when Bloodborne came out, that was actually for me a selling point for the PS4. And I remember I got it pretty much just to play that game. I knew I was going to play other games because Sony always had better exclusives in my opinion, but it was really because of a game like that. So it was inevitable, I think, that I would get Demon Souls, and I'm totally glad I did. It's a surreal experience. It's a really, really good game. And it's a shame, Swinny, that you can't experience it, if that makes sense, especially if I assume it's going to be an exclusive, because is it published by Sony? I didn't really see the credits properly.
It is 100% an exclusive.
I don't know if Halo is going to be an exclusive or Super Mario Odyssey too.
The question is more, will it eventually get a PC port?
Well, I feel like it might get a PC port. That's the thing, right? So you're not going to be locked out of it or anything like that. So it's not an exclusive in that sense.
Overall thoughts on the console, Mike? And I don't know if you guys saw this, but people are reviewing the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X and then giving it a rating, which I just find bizarre. Like IGN gave it an 8. It's like, I'm not really sure what I'm meant to do with that. But
what are you going to do with an 8? Should you buy the console or not? Like, what's the...
I mean, IGN give ratings to Smash Brothers DLC characters. So what do you...
I don't mind that as much, to be honest, as like giving it to a console. I just think seems odd to me. But I agree. Like in terms of your purchase, and your hands-on that you have now, you're happy with your purchase? Do you feel like you could have waited or...
Well, of course I could have waited. And again, it's not that I enjoy it, I love it, and I really appreciate the fact that I even managed to get my hands on it, given that there's a lot of people who don't. True. So I don't want to sound ungrateful here. It's just,
Yeah.
again, just because of all the projects and stuff that I have, the only thing in the back of my mind is, do I have time to really give this thing justice? And I feel like I don't, unfortunately. I don't have that ability. In the past, I might have even taken a few days of work to be able to enjoy this thing. And I know other people, other friends that I have who have actually ordered one, and I don't know, as you guys might know, EB had a bit of a delay in there, so they're only getting theirs on Monday onwards.
that's rough.
But they had days planned off to just play the PlayStation,
That's so
and
rough.
I think that's pretty cool. It's super rough. So I don't want to sound that I don't appreciate this, because I totally do. I think it's an amazing console, fantastic controller. The games, especially stuff like Demon Souls, is just wow. It's truly, it felt proper next gen. It felt like something I could only really achieve with a PC, obviously, but it's a game that isn't even available on PC. So the only way I can have this experience, and especially a game like Demon Souls, I'm legit sitting here going, how could I not have thought about possibly buying this game? Are you serious? Like, for someone who loves these games so much and has played all the Souls games and a lot of the derivatives, including a bunch of games on the Switch. I own multiple copies of Dark Souls on multiple platforms. It's like, what? How could I even think about not getting this game? And I'm so glad I did. It's just perfect for the PS5. So yeah, it's. I'm not going to give it a rating, but absolutely it. Massive thumbs up.
Massive thumbs up. No, you sound very enthusiastic about it. And I mean, for me, it was actually cool. Like, it sounds so weird. It feels like I'm coveting, but just going around the shops like this week, it was a really cool vibe for me. And it sounds goofy, but just seeing people, and they've got like their shopping bags, and there's like a PS5 or an Xbox Series X. It's just cool. It kind of like brought a smile to my face naturally. I was just like, this is really cool, man. We're like in the new generation. People are, and
especially after the lockdown.
Yeah. No,
I mean, we're all stuck inside, and it's been, let's face it, society as a general has kind of hit a bit of a low point in many ways, and you've got the US election that's kind of making people feel a bit negative. Obviously, you've got COVID, which has had a negative impact. So it's cool to get something like that gives people joy. And one other thing that I keep thinking about is, you build a PC to be able to have some of those experiences, and that PC is going to cost you, $2,000 plus, $3,000 maybe. And yes, it can do certain things a hell of a lot better. But the fact that you can go out, and if you're lucky, you can get a PlayStation for $750. Holy moly, that's amazing! It's so cheap, relatively speaking. So
well, and I mean, moving on to another story, and then also talking about value in gaming, we also found out that xCloud is actually launching in a beta phase, a preview phase, far earlier than we first expected. So about a month ago, we had Phil Spencer kind of randomly confirm that in early 2021, Australia would be getting xCloud, which is the cloud gaming service as part of Game Pass Ultimate and other offerings. And yeah, it just got announced this week that in Australia, Brazil, Japan, and Mexico, which are some of the regions where they're launching xCloud next year, they've actually got a registered version where you can register and then sign up for a preview of it. So I promptly signed up because I'm really keen to try it out. It's launching the 18th of November. Swinny, did you sign up for it?
I did sign up, and the email that they send you says,
yeah.
Thank you for your interest. We'll let you know within a few months if you've been selected for the preview. And I'm like, is this an old template that they just reused from the US preview?
The whole marketing around this is a bit screwy because, they actually officially said we're not calling it xCloud anymore. It's just Xbox Cloud Gaming as part of, Game Pass. And then they've brought back all the xCloud marketing, and it's very contradictory. If you go on certain parts on the Xbox website, they'll sort of say that xCloud's finished, but then it's kind of almost starting from fresh in Australia.
Well, this email is called Project xCloud.
I know. That's what I'm saying. It's really weird. It's like they've dusted everything off from the US and European launch. I think that's just a mistake. I couldn't sign up for a while. Like I had to try it like on different services and stuff like that. It just wasn't working, the registration. And Xbox were like reaching out, trying to help me. But yeah, so I'm in the same camp as you. I haven't gotten an official sort of, yes, you're in, but it's only like a few days away. So my next problem was I kind of stupidly thought that this was available on PC. And then I'm like, oh, this is only on phones, which I only have Apple, like iPhone. So I actually had to borrow an Android from my wife's dad. And then now it's become like, why does he want this phone for? And I'm like, oh, I don't want to confirm what it's for. I'm just like,
why are you ashamed of it? Why not?
I don't know. Well, the funny thing is he needs it, quote unquote, needs it for a drone. So it's not that much better of a reason.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I'm really, really keen to try this out and see how this is. Because I was actually, like I said, I was really impressed with Control on the Switch, even though that was running in the States. So I'm actually super keen to try this out and just see how all the games work on it.
Yeah, I'm really pumped to try this. I am pumped to try this also, assuming that it's going. I don't know if we've confirmed. Can it access your cloud saves?
Oh,
or games that you've played? Because if it can, then that's really useful because then I can just essentially do, like that. Essentially, what Mike you've talked about in the past with, the cross-platform saves. You can already do that
with
across the Xbox.
The switcher.
Yeah, you can already do that across the Xbox ecosystem. So I'm assuming it's going to eventually be, if not now, available for xCloud. But because this is still preview and they're still kind of rolling a whole bunch of stuff out, maybe it doesn't. But that'd be cool to know.
Yeah, I'm trying to look for the FAQs. Look, my gut feel would be 100% it would access the cloud saves. It'd be kind of insane if they didn't. Because, I mean, the kind of way that Phil Spencer's been talking about everything from an Xbox perspective is just, they want you on the service. They don't really care what screen you play the game on. So there's PC, your phone or whatever. But it kind of gets back to this whole thing of Apple. It's like so annoying that they don't allow this on the iPhone. Because if this was on the iPhone, I think I would take advantage of it a lot more because I've got my iPhone on me all the time. But
absolutely, and that's still quite a big market when it comes. Most of the people that I know actually have an iPhone. So
yeah. So no, it's going to be really interesting. Like I guess, given that it's going to launch during the week, we'll cover it in next week's podcast around just our hands-on experience. If we are, in the camp of getting, like the, what do you call it? Permission, I guess, or registration to actually do it.
I'm gonna try two kinds of games. I'm gonna try a game that I know has had its whole interface designed for touch controls for xCloud, which is Minecraft Dungeons. So they've actually put an entire kind of touch interface when you're playing it on xCloud, which is cool. And I'm also going to try out something like Gears of War, like a huge game that's is actiony. Minecraft Dungeons, if there's a little bit of lag, I'm sure it's not going to be a problem. Whereas if playing something like Gears of War, lag would suck. So I'm kind of going to try two different kinds of games at a minimum. Hopefully,
do you have a controller for your phone?
So you can use your Xbox One controller.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah, so if you've got the Bluetooth enabled one, yeah.
Yep.
Well, this is interesting for me because I don't have a Xbox One or a Series X, so I am limited. Even though I've got Game Pass Ultimate, I'm only limited what is released on PC, and there's still some stuff that's only on console. But with the cloud-enabled stuff, it actually has more games on it. So there's some games that I can't play, and I'm like, oh, well, I actually can play them now because it's cloud-enabled. So, yeah. So, Swinny, I should have checked this beforehand, but with the cloud-enabled stuff, do you know if that's ever coming to PC?
They've talked about it. I think that they would probably prioritize bringing it to console first and then PC, so that something like an Xbox Series S can take advantage of it. Because we talked about the limited hard drive space.
That's right. So it's not even on the Xbox yet.
No.
Oh.
It's only on Android.
I'm just seeing an article. Because they do plan to bring it. Okay, interesting. Yeah. I must admit, stupidly, I just assumed that it was on console.
No, so that'll be. I reckon that would be the priority, and then they'd look at PC after that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense because it's also probably the one where the games that you're playing are probably more twitchy, or you're expecting more from them. It's just like I was really keen to play it because you would have seen the other news around Google Stadia that they started to give away the Stadia pack to people who were subscribers to YouTube Premium.
Really, I did not see that.
Yeah,
Huh.
so
I
like
didn't get that.
It doesn't apply to us in Australia because we don't have
No.
Stadia here. But
Of course.
yeah, if you're a YouTube US or UK or European maybe, but don't quote me on that. I believe it was UK YouTube Premium member. The actual packs, you know, the ones with the Chromecast that was dedicated
And
for
the
Stadia,
and the controller.
Wow.
and the controller, they were giving it away for free.
Crazy. For free.
Like,
well, I
yes,
guess they
you just-
need to get people onto it because it's been reviewed pretty
Oh
badly.
no, dude! To me, that's terrible as a sign. I mean,
Well,
you combine
yeah,
that
exactly.
with-
That's what I mean. Yeah.
you combine it with Google, and you just go, "Oh God, that's
Does
just
that
like."
does that controller just work as a generic PC controller as well?
I don't think
Because-
so.
Oh,
Maybe you'll be able to set it up like that, but that controller, it's got some weird tech that it talks directly to your router. So then it because what it's trying to do is be as efficient as possible to get to the cloud servers. It looks like a pretty cool controller.
For PC, if you could get it.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, but it sold out really quickly. So when I say sold out, it's basically you sign up to the trial and you get it, and then you can cancel the trial, and then you keep the Chromecast. Like Chromecast itself, it was a Chromecast Ultra, which about
Wow.
I don't know what, like $100, Mike?
$100,
in
yeah.
Australia? Yeah.
I think that's how much.
So I mean, just from that point of view, it's like that's just a no-brainer. And I think like at the time of when we're recording this, the UK ones are still available, which is just madness. So no, like I'm actually. It sounds stupid, you know. Picked up the Game and Watch this week. That was my new console, and then this xCloud thing. I'm like, I'm actually super keen to see how this goes because as much as I'm a physical game collector, like yeah, this cloud stuff. I in a weird way, I feel like it's superior to digital for me. It's just like, okay, if you're going to go into that digital kind of space, bang, just do it in the cloud then. So yeah, we'll have more thoughts on it next
If it
week.
runs great, yeah. But
Yeah.
it's ultimately a little bit dependent on the game, how well it runs, your
And
internet
I can
connection.
I can send you
Yeah,
the
yeah,
link, Mike, if you want.
Yeah.
If you want to sign up.
Yeah, hit
then
me
you
up.
could talk
Yeah, I'll
about it
use
next week as well.
I'll use my partner's old phone.
Yeah.
That I
Sweet.
gave to her and then I destroyed.
It's
Yeah.
also available on tablets as well, Android tablets. You don't need a specific.
Okay.
phone.
Yeah, tablets
Have
and
one of those
phones.
lying around. Cool.
Yeah, I've got a few different controllers, so hopefully one of them works because I don't
Yeah,
unfortunately have
same.
an Xbox controller. But we were talking about microtransactions earlier in the show, and I think you're right, Mike, in terms of the discussion around microtransactions and the sensitivity of them, because we saw this week probably like in terms of microtransactions top 3 in the entire world, EA, they've actually introduced a whole new set of tools specifically designed around FIFA 21, which is, again, a game that reaps in a billion, literally billions of dollars of revenue. And, it's all about, from their perspective, and I'll put the corporate lingo on it, it's like, self-empowerment, self-management of the microtransactions. So to the point where you can see, how much you've played, how much you've spent. It tries to pull in as much as it can around that data. Some of them, there are some limitations just given that, some of the console spend, they can't actually see that because that's actually on the console manufacturer's point. Like it's interesting to know that like they can't even see some of that data. And then also allow it so as a parent, you can go, well, I'll limit you to X amount of spend. And, from that perspective, I'm not a huge believer or liking, DLC and like these kind of microtransaction type of stuff. But I think if it's reasonable and your kid had an allowance and they go, look, I really want to spend, $5 a week or a month or whatever on it, maybe like given that there is tools to limit it, but
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't live, unfortunately, in an era where you publish a game, you send it out, and that's it. That's the cost of it, and that's the physical copy that gets sent out. You do have server costs, you do have
That's true.
ongoing development costs, etc. But I think when you make billions of dollars,
yeah, literally billions.
it's obviously going a little too far down the. You're taking advantage of someone somewhere in order to make that kind of money. So, and it's funny because I just played, and I did message you about this. I grabbed Trials on the Switch, and I hadn't played it. I hadn't played Trials since, my gosh, when did we
Trials
used to play the
HD,
original
which is
Trials or
the
something? Trials
360
HD,
one,
yeah,
yeah.
yonks ago.
I think
And one thing
we
that
we played the sequel to Trials 2
I think
at
we
your
did,
place, so
yeah.
that's probably the last one. Can't remember if that was called what that one was called, but it was essentially
It was a while ago.
the one.
Well,
that
it
came
wasn't
up.
Trials
Like,
2
since
because
360 days.
Trials HD was the sequel to Trials 2, which
Well,
was
that's
on
what I
PC.
meant. That's the one I meant.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's the one.
So I don't
meant,
know,
HD.
but it was like 360 days, right?
Yeah.
That we played it.
Yeah.
So I
A long
played it
time
since
ago.
then. So one thing that seriously put me off was the loot boxes in the game.
Yeah, terrible.
Of course, Ubisoft. Of course, they introduced that, and that the original. I do not recall it ever having that because cosmetics and stuff just weren't a thing that you even give a shit about. And it's I know different horses for courses, but courses for horses for courses, whatever. But to me, it actually really put me off. And not only did it put me off because of that annoying, just the mechanic, just really irks me for some reason. There's also a delay. So when you go to open it, it does that stupid shake on the box. But I feel like it's also sending something back to the server to maybe sync the contents or something. I don't know what the hell's going on. But it's that delay as well. And that whole, oh, you're shaking this thing and it's like you're playing the slot machine again. I don't give a shit about any of that. Just give me the damn cosmetics as a level up every time I level up instead of this mystery box. Make it so, at level 15, you get this particular part or whatever, this sticker collection or whatever, not this chance to get a particular thing. So the whole thing just sickens me. Like it pries on people's addictions to that sort of stuff. And I think the fact that, this company's making billions of dollars, and this is going to be hilarious if one day I work for EA, it might come back and bite me in the ass. The fact that they're making so much money off something that, ultimately is just prying on people's basic psychology and their ability to get
Mike,
addicted.
what do you think about the tool that EA have created for FIFA to help people self-manage that then?
Look, I think it's kind of like as a last resort because they're realizing because they're getting sued and there's multiple places around the world now that are putting laws in place to prevent those kind of practices, and I feel like it's not a benevolent thing. It's not something that I think someone in the corporate office came up and said, "Look, guys, I think we're doing the wrong thing here. I think we need to empower people to self-manage better, to control their habits, etc." I think it's a knee-jerk reaction to the fact that there's going to be tighter and tighter laws in place and there's potential for them to get sued for a hell of a lot of money because of the practices that they have. And I think it's just a knee-jerk reaction. Like, I appreciate the fact that they're doing something about it, but it's like, I don't know, a drug dealer giving out pamphlets telling people, hey, if you've got an issue with the drugs we're selling you, well, here's a support group you can join.
It's interesting you mentioned the whole, you don't think that there's a care there, because apparently this is part of EA's Positive Play project. So
Positive Play project. Wow.
They rolled out in June, and I won't say I know every facet of it, but apparently this campaign was to address toxicity and other harmful elements within the gaming community.
Oh gosh, come on, corporate nonsense. You want to talk about toxicity? The whole practice that they're doing is toxic.
Look, I think it's good that there's more options for people, right? I don't want to take away the fact that there's a positive step to this, but anything when you're talking about self-managed. So I've had a family member in the past that has had gambling addiction, and in Australia, the only way to they've started introducing some stuff around that, which has made it better, but you can self-impose restrictions. So you can go to a gambling venue, and say, and fill something out. I don't know if you go to physically the venue or just go through the gambling association, and where you then get put on a list where they cannot allow you to actually gamble at that venue, but it has to be done by the person themselves.
But how many people do that?
A lot, dude. No.
Do they?
Just on that, a lot of people do it because there was a court case recently where Crown didn't honor that with a real problem gambler, and they've been sued to death for it. Yeah. But the problem with that act is you have to do it at every venue. It's not like a blanket, hey, I want to put myself on a list. Basically, I've got an issue here and I don't want to gamble anymore. Like I'm rock bottom. You have to go to each one.
To talk about my personal experience with my family member with that. So 100% what you said is correct. But the problem is it still relies on that family member or that person taking that first step and
which
then
I think is right,
acknowledging-
though. I think that's right.
And then
it should really
Well-
be the person's
and then,
choice.
just let me finish my part, please.
Yeah, go
'cause
on. Sorry.
It's really important for me to discuss. And then to also, as you said, it's per venue. So even if they went and self-imposed themselves at one venue, then they would then have all these backup options. And it ended up being so it's really on the strength of the person's willpower and the motivation to do that. And it ended up being it didn't happen. But as you said, like the fact that it is there for people to do is great. But whenever you talk about, and going back to FIFA, self-managing this stuff, I don't know how I feel about it. I think it's really good from a parental control. Okay, we give our son, whatever pocket money per week, right? Not that I think kids should be, or teenagers should be doing this anyway, but at least there's some controls here around this. And you can say, okay, then you can literally put limits on it, right? Which is,
But is that the target audience in the end? I mean, don't you think that parent would see that their credit card's being charged for crap?
No, dude. Like, a lot of this happens all the time.
What, until they notice that? But I think that's
Not
the
even-
wrong
no,
target
no, a lot of
audience.
people don't look at their credit card, for transactions. As long as it's not like insane, like hundreds of dollars can leak through easily.
And you
from
reckon,
court-
you
there's
reckon
court
a
cases
parent's not
around
going to
this.
notice that their kid is leaking hundreds of dollars?
like there's
in-
court
Yes,
there's
dude.
court
That's
cases around this already. Like there's so many cases out there of parents suing these businesses, whether or not it's EA or it's
Fair enough,
probably
but I
mainly
just think
EA
I
with
think it's
FIFA,
the
but-
wrong. It's trying to look like you're doing the right thing, but it's targeting the wrong people. In the end, I think that's to me instinctively that doesn't feel like that's the big target market. If you really want to help people, most of the people that play those FIFA games and stuff, I don't know what the breakdown is, but it's not going to be all kids that use their mom's credit cards. It's going to be actual adults and people who have their own money that they're wasting on things like that. And
There's a lot
how
of kids
is
that
this
play it.
going to
There's a lot
help
of kids
them?
that play it.
No, there are a lot. But what I'm saying is that particular tool itself, yes, it's better than nothing. Don't get me wrong. It absolutely is better than nothing. But will that tool, to Swinny's point, be used by the large chunk of people that actually do manage their own money and are using their own credit cards and they're wasting their own money on this stuff? Will those people who are already in a position where they clearly don't have the self-control to do these things themselves, be able to take that step to acknowledge that they have a problem in the first place, and then have the self-control to impose those things on themselves? I think that's going to be the real tricky part. Now, again, don't get me wrong. It's better than doing nothing about it. But spinning it like you're doing it as a benevolent thing to help the community, that's complete bullshit. It's absolute complete bullshit.
Well, I think for me, like, one thing that's really remarkable is that our conversation so naturally and without like a battered eyelid turned to gambling and gambling mechanisms, and the fact that they still argue that it's a surprise mechanic and it's not gambling.
It's a surprise mechanic.
100% tapping into psychology around gambling. Like, I have a lot of
100%,
addiction
yeah.
problems, and like pretty much, I gamble on like sports, and I've always kept it well in track, but I've never touched the pokies because I've got like a huge addiction problem. And I reckon, like, just the way they're wired and the way that they trigger the things in your brain, some people, they just can't almost like help themselves, right?
Oh,
And-
absolutely, yeah.
and just going back to Swinny's point, and like, from my perspective, I think, it always needs to be the person themselves saying.
But it can't
I-
be
just
the person always.
like, I think it's always the person's choice ultimately, from my perspective of how I look at the world. But I think it's very sneaky the way that these companies do it, and I understand because I work at a sneaky company that they make it per venue or per game, or like, I should be able to just go into the PS5's menu and say, I don't want to participate in loot boxes, or I want to cap it out, so I'm only spending $5 on anything related to loot boxes per week, and then I set it once, and then I don't have to touch it again, and I don't.
But I
have
disagree
to,
that it's
use that willpower each time.
It's solely the person's choice. I totally disagree with that, because people don't live in their own bubble. they have family members that get affected by this. So you can't say that you have to rely, and it always has to be the person's choice to go there and put these restrictions on themselves. It doesn't work as simple as that, because we live in a society. And the people that have these addictions have family members, friends, etc., that are greatly impacted by these things. And look, I'm speaking from someone who doesn't necessarily, I haven't had the same experiences as Swinny. I have had parents who have had issues with alcoholism, so you can kind of compare the same two things. But the reality is, some of these things as a society need to be addressed, because it isn't just a person's individual thing at play. If they live by themselves and they completely had no interactions with anyone else, maybe fair enough. They're the only ones who can control that. Who are they really harming in the end? But when they're harming their kids, for example, because they're spending all their money on bullshit like gambling, as opposed to, you know, taking care of their kids or providing health, education, etc. for them, then it's more, other people need to intervene. You can't just rely on that person doing it, because it's massively detrimental to the rest of society.
I think it's just a principle thing. Like, my principles are different. Like, I think all of us, and I don't think it's a, you know, you necessarily have to experience something like this, but we've all experienced family members to different degrees be afflicted with severe addictions, and they're very detrimental to their lives. I just always have a very personal view and a principle that, you know, all change has to come from within. And yes, you know, there are interventions, there's all this other kind of stuff you can do, but ultimately that person needs to say, I have a problem, I want to do something about it for any meaningful change to happen. And I just
agree,
think that they shouldn't put hurdles up in front of you. Like, we were just talking about the gambling stuff. You should be able to go to a government register and say, I have a problem, I'm at rock bottom, like my family are in despair, I've lost my house, whatever it is. I do not want to participate in gambling. So
anywhere,
you know,
exactly.
Like, here's my ID, bang. Like, I should be banned from all of that stuff. But that's a choice you have to make, and it's a huge choice. But that shouldn't then be like, oh, then I can swing to the local pokies and
absolutely.
Or if I'm a drinker, like I also think for drinking it should be the same.
Yes,
I think
it should
that,
be.
like,
You should.
Places should not allow you to go buy alcohol. Like,
Absolutely,
but you should choose that. Like, it should be your personal choice.
But the only difference, I agree that it should be a blanket thing that it can apply. So as you said, you need, say, a specific license, or they need to do a check. And if you're on the system and you've said that, hey, I don't want to be sold this, or I don't want to partake in any gambling, they automatically stop you from doing that, as a blanket rule across the entire state, if it's a state-based thing or nationally, whatever. But I do feel that I would take it one step further, and I would say that it shouldn't just rely on a person actively going to do that. I think there should be other measures in place that prevent people from being able to do that. So we have rules that say, you know, you need to be 18 to go buy alcohol. Well, should it be a person's choice to say, well, I'm 15, I'm smart enough, I should have the choice to buy my own alcohol? No, it shouldn't. Society puts a blanket law in place that says, for the betterment of society, the rule is you have to be 18 and above to do this. And I think it should be the same, where there should be systems in place that you can interfere into a person's life if, for example, they're abusing their children as a result of alcohol or drug abuse. Let's use that as an example. The Department of Child Services or whatever should be able to put a law in place that says this person is not allowed to go and gamble their money that, you know, they're receiving to take care of their kids instead, or buy alcohol with that money. And it's not up to them whether they want to do that or not. We put that in as a society, and I think there should be exceptions like that. But in the end, will it work? No, if the person doesn't actually genuinely want to do that.
To close the topic off, for me, like, I think we're all in agreement that this stuff shouldn't exist in the first place, all these EA loot boxes and everything, right? Like,
I don't agree with that.
Well, okay. Well, I think that, you know, the best case scenario out of this is that they don't even have those gambling mechanics in their games, right?
That would be nice, yeah. I wouldn't say, you know, ban them completely. That would be nice.
And this is my last thought on the topic, because I think we need to move on, is that I think that they should put some max spend and max daily limits that are universal, but then still have the ability for people to use these tools to put even further limits. So I think there's more that can be done. If these things have to exist because it's just part of their business model and they have to do this for some stupid reason or business reason.
Because they want to make billions. That's the only stupid reason.
I think they need to go a step further. So that's just my last thought on it. So.
Yeah. And like, just to sum out for me, I generally agree with what you're saying. Like, and I don't play these games anymore because of these mechanisms. I don't think that means that they should be banned from having them. But I do agree with you, Swinny, that I think being good corporate citizens, they probably should have natural defaults in the system, which say, hey, you've spent your daily, usage limit, and maybe you can make that so that's like uncapped, but the default is like a certain amount. But probably the one thing that I think this does mark, given that this is probably the number one game in terms of microtransactions, we've probably reached peak microtransactions just because, there's a lot of legislation coming around in a lot of jurisdictions and putting a lot of pressure on the practice. So, like, I think we're all going to be happy if there's less of this stuff. And even, in Assassin's Creed, we're seeing less of it than we had before. So yeah, I think, there's a big difference between banning it outright versus like having it. But I do think we've reached peak,
regulating it, yeah.
microtransactions.
Oh, absolutely have, yeah. It doesn't fly anymore. But that's, to me, ultimately, that's what sucks. The fact that these companies took advantage of it as much as possible and didn't take one step back to say, well, are we actually doing the correct moral thing? No, it's just profits. And I know in the end it's an organization. They're not there to care about you and your life. So, it makes sense that we are where we are.
So, Swinny, no natural segue here that I can find. I'm actually shocked that you haven't spoken more about wrestling in the podcast, given you are a huge wrestling fan. But you've been very on topic, whenever games come up. But I think this is a fair opportunity for you to go through the next item.
Yeah, so honestly, there hasn't probably been a natural way to feed it in because there hasn't really been any positive news about wrestling in video games in a long time until this week. So this week, All Elite Wrestling, who are probably the second biggest US promotion and maybe the second biggest in the world at the moment, although New Japan's probably still just behind WWE. So they've been around for, I think, getting close to 2 years now, or a year and a half, AEW. They had a mock tech conference this week to unveil their long-awaited video game lineup. Well, we thought just one video game. And the mock tech conference was hosted by some of their biggest stars, including their vice presidents as well as their stars, Kenny Omega and Cody Rhodes. And it was actually quite humorous. I think Kenny Omega was dressed up like Steve Jobs. And then along comes Britt Baker, another one of their stars. She's also dressed like Steve Jobs, and they kept interrupting each other. And then Cody Rhodes shows up. So it was obviously playing off the whole Apple one more thing kind of thing. And to clarify, or to, I guess, give some context, so Kenny Omega and Cody Rhodes are huge, legit video game fans. So these aren't just, they're wrestlers involved because they need to say, we've got some new video games coming out. They are legit video game fans. We've talked about Kenny Omega before being part of the Street Fighter V community. He's a huge Street Fighter V fan. He's been part of Capcom's presentations, hosting, unveiling characters. Cody Rhodes has also unveiled a Street Fighter character before. So these guys are huge fans. And what's really important about this is wrestling video games, with the exception of, I think it was Fire Pro, the latest Fire Pro game, they've been in a bad place for a while. So the biggest, player in the game is WWE, of course, and then you talk about their 2K series. They had their recent, was it Battlegrounds? I think it was called, that just didn't look.
Yeah, I think Battlegrounds 2 maybe, or WWE Battlegrounds.
It was Battlegrounds, but it was kind of like an All Stars 2, so that over the top arcadey look. But generally, it's always been WWE 2K for the last for the last 5, 6, 7 years or so. So there hasn't really been much out there for people that love some just classic, well-playing wrestling games like they were in the N64 days and the early PlayStation days. And that's really important because right at the top of this conference, Kenny Omega's name-dropping No Mercy. Fire Pro, which is, not so much known as 64 series, of course. That's across multiple generations, but No Mercy is almost like the epitome of classic wrestling games. It was the fourth in the series of the Aki produced developed games on the Nintendo 64. And they announced not only a console game, but 2 mobile games. But the console game actually has the involvement of the director of No Mercy, Hideyuki Iwashita. So, and Omega's the creative director. So they're definitely feeding into, hey, we know everyone doesn't like wrestling games anymore. They've taken the fun out of them. They're just, they're loaded with microtransactions. We want to make a game basically like No Mercy. And kind of Fire. People love Fire Pro and stuff. So
well, there's a segue right there.
yeah, so that's really really cool. Now Ukes are actually handling development. So Ukes were working on the WWE 2K series up until 2K19. Then 2K themselves took over the reins of that, and Ukes got ousted for various reasons. So they're actually involved, which means you got a lot of development pedigree here, but hopefully, and Ukes go all the way back to the SmackDown games on the PlayStation and everything. And the other two games they announced one was a mobile general manager booking sim, which is pretty cool, and also a mobile casino game, which I'm not a fan of, but weirdly it kind of fits within AEW's theme because all their pay-per-views are Double or Nothing, All Out is very casino themed. But the idea of, okay, I have no idea, I didn't look into it, is that a real game where you're spending money and stuff? I have no idea. I honestly don't care about that. But it's the booking seems pretty cool because it's likely in the spirit of the Extreme Warfare series, which date back to like 1995. I used to use them all the time. Just the idea of running your own wrestling promotion, like you've got Football Manager and things like that. And the Madden games have had general manager sims and things where you sim seasons. But when you're talking about wrestling, then you can say, okay, I want this person to become the champion. They've got a storyline with this person and things. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, just overall some great news. And yeah, looking forward to seeing how the games turn out, that console game. So.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting to me because, even I have a little bit of an affinity with the 64 games, and the fact that they're mentioning that. The thing that always makes me nervous though about anything wrestling is just I feel like it's just you're just waiting until Vince McMahon opens the checkbook and buys AEW, unless they've confirmed that they will never sell it. Well, because that's what he'll do.
People that own AEW are actually worth more than Vince McMahon. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's the Khan family. They're involved in massive sports promotions. They own the Jaguars and things like that. So,
okay, interesting. That's good. That's good to know, actually.
The head of AEW is Tony Khan, the son of I can't remember the main Khan guy, his name, but yeah,
Genghis.
Yeah, they're huge. They're a force to be reckoned with. They're on TNT, national TV in the US and stuff. So yeah.
No, it's interesting to me because I'm not a wrestling fan, and it still has come across my desk as you say. Like I'm like, how do I know about All Elite Wrestling? And it's just like lots of different sources are sort of saying about it. And I think given how from what I understand, where WWE is perceived in the marketplace these days, like I hear everyone talking about it's not as good as it used to be. The storylines aren't as good. The way they're treating the wrestlers. I saw even the other day that a wrestler was fired within 10 minutes of saying on Twitter that she supports unionization.
Yeah, there's a lot in that story that kind of the timing, I think, was very coincidental with that, but definitely would have had an impact. But look, it's horrible. Like it's everything around that, and I could rant on for a long time about that. So all I'll say in regards to AEW, that if people used to love wrestling and kind of fell out of love with it, or just didn't like what WWE has been doing for a long time, give them a shot. AEW is actually really really fun and has some huge cool stars in it. So.
And one thing we haven't mentioned before we move on to the next...
Shaq involved for some reason, so that's really...
So one thing that I don't think we mentioned is there any timeline in terms of when this game's going to come out?
I don't believe so. I think the footage they showed was almost like just a pre-rendered thing, which honestly didn't look very good, but it was, I think, they didn't give really any indication around a release date or anything there, but I would say probably expect it sometime in 2021. So.
Okay. Yeah, no, cool. It sounds like something that you'll definitely pick up.
Did you guys ever see the video? That Vince McMahon meme thing where he's falling off his chair?
Yes.
It's three or four slides. I only actually saw the video that's from recently, and it wasn't particularly easy to find for some reason.
Oh, you
Did
mean
you
the
ever
actual source?
the actual source of
Yeah.
it? Yeah, it's. I don't know if have you guys seen the actual source? Swinny probably has.
Yeah,
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I never saw it.
I want to
until now.
move on to the next topic. And we have spoken about this extensively on the podcast, and I've stopped joking around being Swinny being the Hall of Famer, but the Xbox Hall of Fame, like there's actually new news on this, Swinny. Do you want to take this away?
Yeah, so I think it was last week mentioned that they were announcing the winners of the Hall of Fame competition this week, and they did. And a lot of it is as you'd expect. The people that we knew were going to win in certain stuff. Then the game-specific categories, obviously a lot more competitive there. But there was one specific category that was always going to be a lot more competitive, which was the category called Gamer Score Champion, which was basically most gamer score earned within the campaign period. Or so we thought. So the campaign period was the 1st of October till the 19th of October. So 19 days was the campaign period. And the rules, basically, the English rules said, most gamer score earned within campaign period. Then when the results came out, everyone's like, wait, what's going on? This person, I earned legit, people earned 296,000 achievement points in those 90 days or something like that.
What?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Right? Then the person who had the top had about 100,000. And people are like, wait, what's going on? We know all these people who got way more than 100,000 during the campaign period. Then the Dutch rules, or maybe some other languages, said it was most gamer score earned within a week during the gamer score period, which were the
that's
correct
different
rules. Very different when you talk about those rules. So within a 7-day period, within the 19 days, the person who earned the most was the winner. And
that's so convoluted.
yeah, but the problem you got then is then people planned everything out and they bought all the.
Yeah.
I don't the fact that they bought all the games. It was their choice to do that, but also they thought the rules were so different here, right? And so they spent all this time. One guy, one person is like, oh, man, I went for 19 days, sometimes barely sleeping at all.
Oh my
To do
gosh.
this, to win this competition, and I had no idea that it was only going to be that was the way it was counted. Now these people, still credit the people that still got it within those 7 days, and there's definitely people used a lot of alt accounts, but I mean that wasn't against the rules, which means that they could create a fake account or a second account.
A second account, yeah.
And then play a bunch of easy games that they've already completed the main one. Look, that's not
fine.
rules. That's fine, right? But this just, man, people are pissed about this because
Well, you can see why. Did the rules clearly stipulate that though, that it was only going to be within that week?
It's funny because we, in a previous podcast, remember, Swinny, when I was reading all the T's and C's and everything. I actually read the rules really carefully. To me, this is actually pretty basic. Xbox or Microsoft, they just need to actually honor obviously they've written the rules incorrectly, but what they've written, they need to honor it. They basically, unfortunately, to me, have to go through, and it's one prize in each of these two categories, and however many regions, they just have to eat it and give them Xbox Series X, because it's just wrong what they've done here. And people, I'm a bad person, I know that. There was so much schadenfreude in the YouTube video that you sent through, Swinny, of one of the community members.
I'm not going to say everything about that video was but it still highlights what the rules were in English.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
But I had to, like I said, I'm a bad person, I know that, but I was laughing at some points of it because it was just not like I'm laughing at the person really, but it's just it's such a bad situation. It's watching someone on a motorized scooter and they're doing something that they shouldn't do, and then they get themselves into trouble. I'm just oh, you shouldn't be spending 19 days doing this, but okay, you get to do it. And then it turns out all the rules were wrong, right? And they've spent thousands of dollars on games. It's it's really cringy. But I was actually surprised that they didn't understand that there was only one prize. It wasn't 8 prizes per category. Because
Yeah.
I read the rules and I'm like, that was clear. There was only one prize,
That was
number one.
That was very clear to me as well. And
Yeah.
I wasn't even entering this category,
Yeah, and the funny thing is, the guy who made the video, he wasn't number one. He wouldn't win anyway, even with the rule.
But but the thing is that the community talks a lot. So whenever there's
Sure.
and
Sure.
there's people out there that definitely would have been in contention. But the thing with this is that it doesn't matter if this was GameScore, it doesn't matter if it was Xbox or even video games. The rules in in English, they like
the important
they
part.
were the wrong rules. It's like how you can see how this mistake happens, but it's still ridiculous that it happened, if you know what I mean. So,
well, hopefully, to your point, they'll just hand out a few more consoles.
I think they have to. I think actually, to be honest, in Australia,
Even
just
legally,
because these are competitions, the way it works is if you've given the rules wrong, you can't just change it. It's not like something you can just wave away with T's and C's. So, because that's happened in Australia before, where people have stuffed up the writing of the rules.
Yeah, so just a very messy situation. And I think, I said at the start of this whole Hall of Fame thing was that this is the first time Microsoft have done anything for the achievement community in a very long time. And while it was only one category, they still screwed it up. So, yeah.
Wow.
No, it was 2 categories. There was 2. There's 2 categories. It was the same thing. And it was weird how in the Dutch version, it had the correct language, but in English, like I was just like, how did they make this error? It's such a weird error to make. I hope they do the right thing and make people whole. I think it's one of those ones where if it got to like Phil Spencer's desk, he'd just go, make it whole, move on. Like he'd literally give it 1 second thought. It's like such little money.
Them, right? Even if they sell the consoles at below cost, which I don't think they do. It's so little for the impact it would have on the community,
But honestly,
definitely.
Majority of people doing this though were just doing it to win. They weren't probably doing it to get a console because they're probably going to get one anyway. So I wonder whether or not they would still actually, send them something that's saying you're in the Hall of Fame or something, or just give them the console.
Yeah,
at the very least.
I think they just add all those people. It's only it's dozens of people. Just get it done and move on.
But I think it's just that they legit deserve it, though, right? If you enter that and it's clearly not stipulated that there's all these underlying rules, then they deserve to win that because it's what they entered. So,
no, for sure. All right, well, we are running long, so I'll do something a little bit different for my favorite segment, the bargain bin. So I'm just going to fly through it. So Epic Games this week, the Text Assist is free. In Nintendo Switch, I pointed out that Abzu is $3 right now, which is 90% off until the 19th of November. Swinny, you pointed out that Dex and Pantsu Hunter, so Dex is 60% off.
Dex is really cool.
That was the point.
What?
I wasn't going to... You can't just mention Pantsu Hunter and fly past it. That's all right.
Oh, okay. Okay, we are over time.
Okay.
Sorry. Next.
PlayStation, again, we did mention this in the main body, but PlayStation 5, you can get all of the 20 PlayStation Plus collection. And that also includes if you ask a mate to log into your account and add them all. That's appreciated, Mike.
And Crypt of the Necrodancer.
That's not on sale right now, but when it goes
free.
on sale.
I think it's free. I saw something just before about it.
They're free in the UK and the European region on PlayStation. I'm all across it, Mike, but I didn't add it in.
Are you sure
Xbox,
we don't have it as well?
Yes, Mike. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. If you're an Xbox Game Pass Ultimate member, you can get 1 month trial of Disney Plus, which is notable because there's no other trials at the moment, and you can always cancel that trial. Game Pass, as always, there's lots of additions and removals in time. EA Play, all 60 plus titles have now been added, and then we'll go through all of these. By default, I'll say that they're all on Xbox and PC, but there's lots of exceptions. So Gears Tactics, just for Xbox, it was already on PC, but now it's added to the Xbox itself. Tetris Effect Connected, really cool game. Final Fantasy VIII, as Swinny mentioned, remastered, is on both. Planet Coaster Console Edition is Xbox only. Streets of Rogue on PC only. River City Girls, and then Star Renegades PC only. So they're the additions. Leaving very soon, so the 16th of November, which is pretty much by the time you'd be listening to this. Darksiders 3, the Munchkin, Talos Principle, and then tracks the train set game. So that was the express version of the bargain bin. Was there any other additions or removals there, Mike Swinny?
Just you killed my Pantsu Hunter joke. I'll never recover. I'll never recover.
And Mike's just confirming that it seems like Crypto the Necrodancer is free on PlayStation. So that's huge if that's the case, Mike.
My 2 seconds worth of Googling. I don't know if that's correct,
just,
but
the UK.
Give it a crack. It might be there. Just make sure you select the game itself, not the bundle. Dex is really cool.
Pick up
Played
Dex
it on
on
PC.
Switch. It's a great game.
I think I might pick it again on Switch, actually.
It might be an error because it actually has 2 versions of the Crypto the Necrodancer. One's free and one's not, which is really odd. Yeah, that's a really cool game.
One quick one that I know wasn't special as well that I grabbed is Ghost 1.0, which is that Metrovania style on Switch as well. Sorry, that's on special.
What platform? Yeah, nice, cool. All right, I want to jump into the review now. So as I said earlier, I played. Like, given that I'm on Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, I am tracking, and Mike, you can see this in the sheet that's called GPU, tracking the games that I play that are available on Game Pass Ultimate versus like, what if I bought them, blah, blah, blah. How much am I actually saving going on this? And I'd always wanted to play Alan Wake, and oddly enough, I actually already owned it on Epic Game Store, so I could have actually just played it on that ages ago. But yeah, so I installed it, and man, like, this game, like, it really has already stuck with me, and I really, even thinking in a year's time it'd be really interesting to reflect on it. But I'm actually, like, fundamentally, one of the things, I'm actually surprised that this game is not held in higher regard. Like, I'd heard of it before, but I never really heard of people talking about this game in such a way of like really, game. Enjoying the experience. But I actually really loved this game.
It was a big deal when it came out.
But it's sort of got a cult following. It's not... It's an interesting one.
I
think so, yeah. Because for me...
That's probably because it was only on Xbox, so it's a PC port.
Oh, see, I didn't appreciate that. And like, I went back and read the reviews, and I found the reviews to be really odd. Like, it was treating it more just as a pure game rather than a piece of art. And I think, like, from an overall impression for me, like, I've ranked this game really highly. Like, I don't think it's a masterpiece, but I do think that there's a lot of artistic flair in this game, a lot of interesting writing, and it's really trying to make you think and break those fourth walls around it being a game itself. And it's just something at the time of going back and reading the reviews, I was really surprised. It just wasn't something that they really pulled out in the game. So, like, just breaking it down, like, 3 main things I wanted to talk about this game and just get your views, because I know, Swinny, you played it a little
collector's edition of it,
like, but didn't finish. Oh, cool. Okay, this is going to be really interesting.
Launch.
So when was that? Was that recently or ages ago?
Launch. About that.
Okay, cool. Because that was like 10 years ago. So this is going to be interesting to see what you think of it. So like the 3 key things I want to just chat about this game is like the references and how it references the material in itself, art, sound design, and how it builds tension. And then the last bit is just around world building and the story. And again, like, as we always do, we never really mention spoilers in any of our retro reviews or reviews in general. So just in terms of the references, like, this game is very much fourth wall breaking. There's parts of it, I think even I sent it to you, Swinny, where there was like a QR code on the wall, and I'm like, oh, okay, what the hell is this? I use it on my phone, and then it takes me to like this meme of the guy who made the game, and something about constipation, and like the game's tone. You remember the game's tone,
literally.
Like, it's pretty tense, horror, dark, serious game. And then just to get this meme, like, based on this QR code, I'm like, this is so odd. And then Sam Lake, the writer and creative director of this game, he's actually in the game as well. So, and that's not a spoiler, but just like late in the game, there's a bit where he's actually in it. And you're just like,
because the main protagonist, Alan Wake, is a writer. So it's kind of meta, the fact that it's a writer. Yeah. They're writing about a writer. And it's kind of really twisty like that.
Yeah. And I mean, just just on those references and like it referring to the real world and its own thing, like if you actually think about it, so they had some big hits, Remedy, prior to this game. And, I think everyone felt like, what's the next game that they're going to make? So they actually struggled with creating like the next game for them. And part of the story of this game, without like any spoilers, it's just like the writer sort of has writer's block. So it's sort of like, what book am I going to write? And that was very much like a reference. And you see that reference throughout. And, the game being heavily inspired by Stephen King and Twin Peaks. I mean, it's so explicit in the game itself in terms of the structure and just sort of like that Stephen King style. And then Twin Peaks, there's heaps of stuff in it that like is such a direct and overt
initially I think it was
funny.
going to be an open world game from memory when they did the engine. And I remember seeing the game before it even came out, and it felt like it had a slightly different vibe. And then there was an interview as part of the Ars Technica War Stories, where they actually interviewed and sort of how that changed from just being this open world to still using that world, but being somewhat more linear, and how darkness and light got incorporated into it. And it's actually worth watching that to go more into the...
Yeah. And that's a really good segue, because that was going to be my third point, but I'll bring it up. So, from a world building and story point of view, you're 100% right. And when I was playing the game, I don't like to know much about the game before playing it. It's just how I'm always with these kind of media properties. I was like, wow, this is, because it's a very linear game. And I was like, this world feels very rich. Like, you're in different locations in this little town, and it all feels very connected and kind of alive, if you know what I mean. Like normally in like a lot of linear games, it feels very much like if you zoomed out, you could just see like this track of like development, and then it's just barren, everything around it. It's very fake when you really think about it. Whereas this game, it felt very grounded and real, like for a very odd game. And then, after the fact, when I finished playing the game, I started reading interviews and watching videos and stuff. And that point that you made, Mike, that they actually intended it to be an open world game. And they even say themselves, they're not sure how much of an impact it had, but the fact that, the game itself had a actual real day-night cycle. So when they were rendering the linear parts of the game, like the lighting was exactly correct in terms of where the sun was, and in reference to the actual town that they're in. And like, and I actually think it is something that really comes to life when you play the game. And just like in terms of the story, like I often actually found myself kind of almost just going, I just want to get through the action scenes. Like I played it on the hardest difficulty that you could play on. I think like normal or whatever it is. You couldn't do it on the higher level. But
go play Dark Souls.
I actually kind of wanted to go... No, all I'm saying is like, in reference to, like, I actually wanted to almost change it to the lower setting, because I just wanted to get through it and see the story more than anything else. And just like, obviously I won't cover the ending, but, it actually felt very much like a really great movie where it ends on a point that you get a question... the nature of the story, the character, is it this or is it that?
Shutter Island,
like almost like, and not saying it is like this, but in the sense of like a...
Okay.
Well, I was thinking like a Blade Runner, where like, you're kind of thinking, well, wait, is Ripley this or that? Or, and I think it actually works much better when it actually is left open. I understand that the DLC for the game, they make some of the things more explicit in terms of, elements of the story that I won't get into, which I think is really unfortunate if that's the case, because I actually like it being a bit open-ended.
It's your own experience, and you take it however you want. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and how you interpret it, because I have a certain interpretation on the story, and then what it means, but I don't know if I'm right, like, and I think it's a very personal thing.
And and then I know it's bit more of an expansion than let's say a regular deep piece of DLC content. Like it's actually treated as a separate title.
It did feel like it. I never finished it, but it felt separate.
Nightmare.
Well, no, American Nightmare is a different game. Yeah, that's a different game though. I'm talking about there's
same.
What was that, Swinny?
That's what I thought you were talking about.
No. So there are two. So the game itself has got 8 episodes from memory. It might be 6 or 8. I can't remember. I think it might be 6. Sorry. Yeah, it's 6. There are 2 standalone independent episodes that were released after the game. The Witness and something else. They're not necessary to play. And actually, a lot of people say don't play them. They're not that good. But there are certain story elements that they talk about. So this was before American Nightmare, which is essentially like a spin-off game because they don't treat it as a sequel. So yeah, like in terms of those spin-off games, and then actually, to be honest, American Nightmare, they do, like you said, Swinny, they kind of pretty much tell you like what the grounding of the game is, which again I feel is kind of disappointing. Like, and not too dissimilar to Blade Runner and what's happened there in terms of.
You judge that for yourself as opposed to just listening to hearsay about it, though.
What do you mean?
Like, to say, oh, they say this, like, shouldn't you actually play those episodes before actually kind of to make a judgment call on them?
Whether like they're good, the episodes, or
well, you said it's not. Oh, they said it's not worth to play those extra episodes. Well, shouldn't you play them to make that call for yourself? That's what I'm getting at.
oh sure, but I don't have infinite time, so I got to manage this and go. Okay,
I really love the game.
Like,
so it surprised me you wouldn't actually play those.
He will.
So.
oh, it's just that like people who love the game say
as in you
don't
think
play
it
like not American Nightmare. Not just to be clear, I just want to loop back. It's not American Nightmare. A lot of people say it's worth playing that, so I am actually interested to play it. I own that game, but the 2 standalone DLCs for Alan Wake, pretty much universally from what I've seen, people say it's not worthwhile playing it. And like I said, I don't have unlimited time, so
I hear a lot of people say that about DLC that I actually really love. So I
can see how it could work like that, and I can see how you watch something and it feels like that's the complete. So I'll use Infinity Wars as an example. To me, maybe unpopular opinion, but I would have liked it if the series stopped right there. Then they had to. Yeah, they had to do the next film after that where time travel was introduced and all of that. And I personally feel like that took away from the experience of the previous film. That if that's where I left the whole thing at, I would have been way happier than if I had watched the subsequent film. So, I mean, I'm not saying I don't think I ever played the DLCs for Alan Wake, so I can't comment on that. But I can see how that can happen where certain things can actually become a detriment. But I can also see what you mean as well, Swinny, how... just the popular opinion isn't always correct. There's certain personal things that you like where it might be really cool for you. So
yeah, sure. And I mean, like with the DLC, like I wasn't even, my point was nothing to do with whether the DLC was good or bad. It's that how it's resolved some parts of this story that I'm a bit like, not a big fan of when they do that in art, but that's fine. It's their prerogative. It's their property. And just the last thing, just around the game, like the art and sound and design of the game and how it builds tension. So I think we said this, Swinny, at the time that I was actually playing Resident Evil 7 and that scared the shit out of me. And I had to stop playing it because it was too scary. And, Alan Wake was there and I'm like, oh, I really want to play this. So I Googled, and I'm like, is it a horror game? Like, does it have horror elements? And everyone was like, no, it's not a horror game. It's not a horror game. Man, this game was scary as shit, man. Like, there was heaps of parts of the game where I was like...
It wasn't scary, but it was tense. But I still feel like it's okay.
No, it was scary to me. And one thing I will say is, because I would always play it at night, so it's dark, and I don't have lights in my room, like when I play these kind of games.
That's cool.
And I have headphones on. But there was one part of the game I needed to get through, and I had no sound. So I was just playing it during daytime. And it actually shocked me how much of a difference. Like, I'm talking about, like, I was really tense when I was playing it the night before versus... I almost didn't have any feeling like that when I was playing it.
See, the thing is, I think psychologically,
with no sound.
People don't realize how important sound is. We discount it so many times because we think, it's mostly a visual experience. It absolutely isn't. Sound, music, I would say, dare I say, it's more than 50% of the experience in many cases. And in a game like that, it is definitely more than 50% of the experience. If you played, say, Alien Isolation, during the day with bugger all sound, it's a completely different experience. The game isn't even really worth playing, to be honest, in an environment like that. Whereas if you play it like you did with the lights off, headphones on, by yourself at midnight, then you get the actual proper full experience, and it's completely different.
Yeah, and like the sound design is quite nuanced. Like the music's really really great. Like the licensed songs that they have. So like it's very episodic, like episode 1, episode 2, and they build it like a TV show. And the final songs for the episode, like when basically it's almost like the credits rolling for that episode, often I'll just like sit there and like, and all it would say is like end of episode 3, and I'd actually just sit back and listen. Like very good choices around music in this game. And yeah, sound is very nuanced in this game. Like it's very obvious. I haven't read this, but it's very obvious that there's a lot of programming in the background in terms of how they're triggering a lot of the sounds. Like even like just you'll hear breath and just like real funny things that it's like, oh wow, okay, they've really done a lot of thinking around how they want to build tension and really create suspense for you. And it's a very like Stephen King style of like build suspense, and then like, okay, you're safe, so you can kind of have a release or something funny happens.
Just a very quick side note about sound and like production, Mike. When you go to play more Valhalla, pay attention to how they use the music when you get closer to location stuff. Very dynamic in that. I just want to flag that for Mike who goes to play that game.
Okay,
and I'll
cool.
talk about it next week. So, sorry, it's just a side
note. No. I think that's important, and I think it's like, to me, you know, sound, music, and that combination. It's one of the most underrated things in games. Like the other one that is Breath of the Wild. There's a lot of stuff that they do around sound design and music, where you know people will go, "Oh, there's no music in the game," but it's very nuanced the way that they do it, and it works really really well because it's almost a palate cleanser where they don't have much. So when they introduce something, it does create drama. And this game's very much the same of it. And, you know, like one thing I will say, like throughout this kind of like the way that they build out the tension, it's all about balance as well, like scare you and then relieve. Like, you know, you'll be in a safe place where you can't be harmed, and the music will really make it clear like you can't. And to me, it's such a artistic flair where the actual game itself is dealing with a lot about balance. And about, you know, how do you balance things in your life, light and dark, story, you know, you can't get something for nothing. So like there's always trade-offs, and that's always like dealt with really well with the ending as well. So yeah, like for me, you know, just in summary, like I love this game. I really love this game. It's one of those games where, you know, I can't wait almost to look back and think about it in the future to see how much of an impact it had. And, you know, I've said this many times on the podcast, like I am actually even more keen to play Control, to the point where I might just bite the bullet and actually get it on PC, because I've got a beefy PC and I've heard it struggles on, you know, consoles, and maybe next year when it comes out on next gen.
It's like $40 or something.
I'm just super keen to play Control. So just, yeah. So just given that it's on the platform, it's like, oh, you know, I'll probably end up sucking it up and doing it. I think Epic, they often have like, you know, $10 off or something like that. So I might get it on the Epic Game Store.
Shocked me because it's been rumored for a while.
You know what? I reckon it will. Yeah, it feels like the kind of game that's sort of slowly dropped, and because of the connection with Alan Wake, it's
true.
But don't let that stop you if you like haven't. You're like, oh, I really want to play this. I'm just kind of just flagging that it has been rumored for a while, and Microsoft's had to come out and deny it in the past. So it wouldn't.
You know, speaking of, I've had that with a few games where what's the one with rats? A Plague's Tale. Plague Tale Innocence. That's the one.
Plague Tale Innocence.
Bought it, and then literally the next week it came out on Game Pass, which I didn't mind because I thought it's a smaller developer, and I was happy that I actually contributed extra to them. So. But it's happened a few times. It happened with Forza. So Forza 7, I bought it, and again, literally the next week. So they had it on special, and I almost feel like, I don't think they do it intentionally to bait people, or they kind of do it as a last resort to say, let's put it on special, you know, 75% off or whatever, see how much money we can get out of it. And then the next week they put it on Game Pass, and that happened with that game as well. So again, I spent $25 and it was immediately for free. But anyway.
Mm. So yeah, like I think if people, it is for free on Xbox Game Pass. I think if at all you're interested in something a bit different, something a bit more psychological, it is like a little bit of a thriller horror game.
Really good.
It's a really good game, like, and it's also very short, relatively. Like,
Which is nice.
It's
It's
probably
good to
about
have
10
that.
hours or thereabouts, and it's very much something that you can just play the first episode. If you really enjoyed that,
It does.
I feel like the game just gets better with time rather than worse. So yeah, they're my thoughts. Like, really, really cool game. Swinny, like, are you gonna play this game? I know that you played a little bit of it.
Yeah, I think I beat the first episode back in the day, but it didn't blow me away. I
Didn't grab you,
appreciated it, but I think I was just looking for something different at the time. I don't play a lot of games in that vein in general, except like weirdly, I actually played through all of the Alone in the Dark
You did
remake.
too, yeah. I couldn't get into that.
So while it's like if you're gonna play any kind of
So
game in that
let
vein,
me
I
ask
should
you,
have played
Swinny,
this, Element
if
instead.
tomorrow it was categorized as an RPG, would you play it?
he has
You'll
to
be all
play it,
over
though.
that.
I just helped to get Far Cry New Dawn decategorized as an
Yeah.
RPG. After all that co-op we put in my fun, but
They did.
finally,
Okay.
they removed
Yeah,
the RPG.
I really don't. Yeah, it's not an RPG. Come on. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Look, no, I probably. I think it's it's a game that I appreciate from afar.
Yeah. And look, I can see already, just even playing the little short snippet of Control on Switch, the cloud version, I can see how much of a linkage between this property, even though it's so old, and Control. Like, it just, even the way it felt, I was like, wow, this actually feels like Alan Wake. Like, it's kind of a bit weird. So I think it's one of those ones, to me, I think ultimately Control is like the next evolution of this game and this style of game. So, and it's just better in all accounts from everyone. So yeah, keen to play that as well. But I'd recommend this game if you're at all interested in something a bit different. So that rounds us out for this week's show. As always, if you want to help us out, make sure that you give us a 5-star review in your favorite podcast service of choice or share with your friends. But
Adios.
for now, that's bye-bye.
See ya.